Chapter 1183. The Southern general's words weren't wrong at all. If Ning Chung went south to defend Three-Way Pass, he'd have enough troops and provisions to rule over the land. Silence reigned in the large tent. If Bailey Yuanlong hadn't brought it up, no one would have dared to bring it up. After all, Ning Chung represented the power of Western Qin's imperial clan. Ning Cheng's backer was Han Yunxi, the woman who'd just given birth to Long Fei Ye's son. Long Fei Ye swept his icy gaze across the crowd and asked, "What about the others? What do you think?" At first, no one dared to speak. Although a few of them didn't agree with Bailey Yuanlong and the Southern general's stance, they didn't think Ning Chung would rebel at a time like this. But they couldn't find any other reason to explain Ning Cheng's decision to send out his troops now. Long Fei laughed coldly. "What? Do you all have the same opinion as General Bailey?" Long Fei Ye's attitude towards Ning Chung was hard to fathom to begin with, so his laugh only made them feel even more uncertain. After some hesitation, Bailey Yuanlong said, "Your Highness, why don't we refute Ning Chung first and see what his stance is?" Long Fei didn't speak, but tapped his fingers lightly on the table. He didn't reveal any of his thoughts. Bailey Yuanlong didn't dare to speak either. Just like that, everyone fell silent. It had to be said that Long Fei was very disappointed right now. All of his civil and military officials were going to defend his country with him in the future and leave behind a glorious stroke in the annals of Cloud Realm Continent's history. But all of them couldn't compare to a single Ning Chung. Long Fei felt both disappointment and heartache. He tapped the table faster and faster with increasing force. In the silent tent, everyone's hearts sped up as they grew more and more nervous. No one knew what Long Fei meant, but they could all tell that he was about to lose his temper. At this time, the head of the civil officials, He Wenqing, stepped forward and respectfully bowed. "Your Highness, this commoner's humble opinion does not agree with the military's words." This He Wenqing was in his early 40s, but he looked like an old man in his 50s. His movements and speech were very slow, but he was a person with feelings and strategy. In the past, both Emperor Tianhui and Emperor Kongsheng had sent people to invite him to come out of seclusion multiple times, but all their attempts ended in failure. Long Fei originally wanted to invite He Wenqing, but he was too busy and delayed the matter until after the founding of the country. Who knew that a month ago, He Wenqing had volunteered to join the army? "What do you think? Let's hear it." Long Fei was still knocking on the table. He Wenqing said seriously, "This commoner thinks that Great General Ning is sending troops to ask for food, not to attack the Northern Dynasty's emperors, but to send troops to relieve the disaster." According to this commoner's understanding, the snowstorm in the northern part of Northern Li is extremely serious. Famine and pestilence are rampant, leaving many villages littered with corpses. Meanwhile, the Northern Dynasty's emperors have yet to do anything. If this drags on for another month, even if the Northern Dynasty's emperors have the heart to help, they won't have the strength to do so. At this, Long Fei Ye's hands finally stopped moving. Everyone exhaled in relief as they focused on He Wenqing's words. Military strategists, those who fight for the sake of war, are considered inferior. Those who fight without war are considered superior. Great General Ning is the latter. As soon as He Wenqing finished speaking, the crowd fell silent. These words were a vicious slap to the faces of Bailey Yuanlong and the military faction. Those who don't care about the lives of innocents and start a war for the sake of war are considered inferior. This was referring to Bailey Yuanlong and the military faction. Those who start a war for the sake of peace are considered superior. This was referring to Ning Chung. Ning Chung didn't ask for food to fight a war, but to save people. With the provisions of the Northern Dynasty's emperors, no matter what Ning Chung did in the northernly battlefield, the Northern Dynasty's emperors wouldn't be able to turn defeat into victory. Ning Chung would definitely win the hearts of the people if he sent troops to help the people now. Ning Chung could win without fighting. The situation in Northern Li wasn't just about the Northern Li battlefield, Ning Chung and Long Fei. If Ning Chung waited until the plague was rampant before sending troops, That would be a ruthless extermination. If he sent troops to help the people now, the people of northern Li would remember Ning Cheng's kindness and Long Fei Ye's benevolence. One had to know that northern Li was a people who lived on horseback and were very brave. It wouldn't be easy to subdue the people there and ensure stability in the future. Long Fei Yi was about to proclaim himself emperor. He would rule over all of Cloud Realm, and all of its people would be his subjects. Did Bailey Yuanlong and the military faction want Long Fei Yi to leave a trail of corpses in northern Li before he claimed the throne? If that was the case, Long Fei Yi would lose his title of ruler before he even ascended the throne. He might even be called a tyrant. Ning Cheng had thought of all this for him. But Bailey Yuanlong and the southern military faction who had followed him for many years had completely overlooked this point. Long Fei Yi looked up at Bailey Yuanlong and the southern military faction and said angrily, "Fighting for the sake of war isn't just subservient, it's brutal." As Long Fei Yi reprimanded, he casually tossed Ning Cheng's handwritten letter at Bailey Yuanlong's face. "Take a look for yourself." Bailey Yuanlong hurriedly picked up the letter, his face turning red after reading it. Ning Cheng had only said one thing in the letter. He said that if they had to wait until after the plague, he would resign from his post as the great general of the Northern Punitive Expedition. He would never mobilize troops in the aftermath of the disaster in this lifetime. Bailey Yuanlong immediately fell to his knees, followed by a group of people behind him. "Your Highness, this general knows his wrongs. This general's worries were lacking in consideration. I beg your Highness to forgive this general for the sake of this general's sincerity." Long Fei Yi looked at Bailey Yuanlong, his deep eyes filled with disappointment. The southern military faction had always thought they had ulterior motives, but Bailey Yuanlong was the one who had followed him for the longest time. The former Bailey general wasn't like this at all. He would never treat the Bailey clan unfairly in the future. Why was Bailey Yuanlong so anxious to eliminate dissidents for the sake of his family's interests? He didn't even understand the principle of the people are the most important and the state is the least important. At this time, He Wenqing added, "Your Highness, in this commoner's humble opinion, Your Highness not only needs to send Ning Cheng provisions, but also medicinal ingredients. If necessary, you can ask for Medical City's help. Once the weather warms, the plague will spread even faster. At that time, southern northern Li will also be in danger. Medical City has already made preparations." Long Fei Yi said indifferently, "Bailey Yuanlong, I'll leave the matter of provisions to you. Make up for your mistakes with merits." This could be considered the last chance Long Fei Yi was giving the old general. If Bailey Yuanlong continued to disappoint, Long Fei Yi would probably make an example out of him before he became emperor. "Thank you for your Highness' grace." Bailey Yuanlong repeatedly kowtowed. Many people present wanted to show concern for Han Yunqi's child, but unfortunately, once Long Fei Yi got angry, no one dared to say anything for fear of making more mistakes. Long Fei Yi didn't hide the situation in northern Li from Han Yunqi and told her the truth. Han Yunqi admired Ning Cheng's attitude, but she didn't say anything. She said seriously, "Long Fei Yi, this is an opportunity. Leave the allocation of medicinal ingredients and physicians to Gu Beiwei. In the future." Han Yunqi stopped here and patted her head. No, Gu Beiwei is too busy. Leave it to Vice Academy head Shun." Long Fei Yi and she both had the idea of taking medical and medicine cities under the jurisdiction of the imperial court. The plague in northern Li not only required large amounts of medicinal ingredients, but also many physicians. If they could use this opportunity to have Gu Beiwei manage the allocation of medicinal ingredients and physicians, as well as provide financial support, there would be less resistance to establishing a separate medical department to govern the medical community in the future. This matter concerned the power of many families in Medical City, as well as the great aristocratic families in Medicine City. If not for Gu Beiwei, it would be difficult to handle. However, Gu Beiwei had to help Gu prepare the medicine. Long Fei remained silent without a word. Seventh young master should be returning to Medical City in about 10 days, right? Han Yunqi had been keeping track of the time. Su Donglin's letter had stated very clearly that Gu had already found the medicinal ingredients and was on his way back. That was the last ingredient. As long as it was delivered, Gu Beiwei would be able to concoct the antidote according to their plans. As long as the medicinal ingredients were found, Han Yunqi was very confident in curing Gu. How about this? Let fourth young Miss Ren go back to assist Vice Academy head Shin. This plague won't end without a year and a half. Once Gu recovers, we'll have him and Gu Beiwei go to Northernly together. Han Yunqi said seriously. I'll be emerging from closed-door cultivation in a few days. Have fourth young Miss Ren go back. Long Fei Yi replied without hesitation. All right, I'll have Chu Shifeng make the arrangements later. Han Yunqi rejoiced. Everyone said that confinement was boring, but she didn't feel it first. Instead, she felt tired. But in the last few days, she couldn't help but want to go outside and breathe in the cold air. She couldn't wait to get involved in military and government affairs. Of course, she couldn't wait to run to Medical City and see Gu Beiwei concoct the antidote for Xiaoqi's undying body with her own eyes. Invite fourth young Miss Ren over later. I need to talk to her about setting up a medical team to go to Northernly, Han Yunqi said seriously. All right. Long Fei Yi nodded again. Long Fei Yi walked out of the tent, just as Chu Shifeng came to report. Your Highness, seventh young master and Dr. Beiwei are at the back of the mountain. Long Fei Yi gave a start before waving a hand to dismiss him. Long Fei Yi didn't go to the back of the mountain right away. Even as a clear-headed man, he didn't understand why he didn't go or what he was afraid of. Not long after fourth young Miss Ren left, two guests arrived at rear camp. They were none other than Ning Jing and Tang Li. The shadow guards lying in ambush discovered them before they even reached the tent. They immediately came to report to Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi went to greet them personally, but suddenly landed in front of the carriage, frightening the horse and driver. Fortunately, the driver pulled on the reins in time to stop the carriage. As soon as Ning Jing lifted the curtains, Tang Li jumped out of the carriage and rushed in front of Long Fei Yi, spreading his arms to fend him off. He didn't recognize Long Fei Yi anymore, but assumed Long Fei Yi was a bad guy blocking his way. Ning Jing had mentioned in her letters to Han Yunqi that Tang Li had changed. He no longer ignored her, but protected and relied on her. Long Fei Yi knew this, but he still felt his heart ache at the sight of Tang Li's hostility. Ning Jing panicked. Ali, that's your big brother. Ning Jing was about to jump off the carriage when Tang Li immediately ran back and reached out to carry her. Chapter 1184. Long Fei Yi watched in silence as Tang Li carried Ning Jing out of the carriage. He did not look at Tang Li's face, but only at his back and actions. Long Fei Yi almost thought that Tang Li was pretending to be stupid. Even if he was stupid, he was still like a slave to his wife in front of Ning Jing. After Ning Jing steadied herself, she took Tang Li's hand and said seriously, "That's His Highness, your brother. He's not hostile to us." Tang Li turned around and glanced at Long Fei Yi. He did not react much, nor did he say anything. However, it was obvious that he was not hostile anymore. Although he did not speak and spoke to Ning Jing, he could understand Ning Jing's meaning. This meant that he was willing to listen to Ning Jing. This was a good sign. Let's go back, Long Fei Yi said lightly. Ning Jing did not take the carriage again. Instead, she pulled Tang Li and Long Fei Yi to walk back together. She held Tang Li's arm and let Tang Li walk beside Long Fei Yi. Tang Li was not afraid. He just looked straight ahead with an expressionless face and kept walking forward. They did not speak along the way. Long Fei Yi deliberately stopped. Ning Jing noticed, but Tang Li still kept walking forward. It was not that Tang Li could not see or hear. He could sense it, but he did not care. It did not matter. Ning Jing turned around and was about to speak when Long Fei Yi raised his hand to stop her. He followed behind Ning Jing and Tang Li as they slowly walked back to the military camp. He was not deceiving himself. It was just that looking at Tang Li's familiar back could make his heavy heart relax a little. Long Fei Yi's attention was all on Tang Li. However, when Ning Jing and Tang Li appeared in front of Han Yunqi, the first thing that Han Yunqi saw was Ning Jing. To be exact, she saw Ning Jing's teeth. Logically, Han Yunqi's tent was not for men to enter as they pleased. However, Tang Li was an exception. Han Yunqi was wearing custom-made clothes. They were loose, but not undignified. She sat on a chaise lounge and leaned against it. Ning Jing and Tang Li sat in front of her. She asked Ning Jing about her teeth in a serious manner. Go back for another checkup in 3 months, and there won't be any major problems, Ning Jing replied honestly. Han Yunqi looked left and right and suddenly smiled. Ning Jing smiled. Ning Jing was serious at first. However, when she saw Han Yunqi smile, she could not help but laugh, revealing a mouthful of beautiful teeth. Han Yunqi became serious. You're beautiful again. Really? Ning Jing was silent for a long time. When she saw that Han Yunqi's smile did not fade, she also smiled and said confidently, Yes, I'm beautiful again. I won't wear men's clothes anymore. Tang Li was in a daze. Ning Jing became stronger. At this time, Granny Zhao carried her over. Tang Li did not react at all. On the other hand, Ning Jing looked at him and liked him very much. However, she did not dare to say that she wanted to carry him. Shouldn't I call her auntie? Han Yunqi asked suspiciously. Granny Zhao did not dare to make a sound. Tang Li was his highness cousin, and Ning Jing was his sister-in-law. In terms of seniority, the little master should indeed call them uncle and auntie. However, in terms of status, that was not necessary. Han Yunqi was not so polite. She smiled and said, Come, let Annie carry you. Long Fei Yi sat at the tea table not far away. He watched without making a sound. Ning Jing carefully took Rui and hugged him. Unexpectedly, Rui was not afraid of strangers. He did not cry and even grinned. Ning Jing was excited. Look, he's smiling. He's smiling. Aya, he's really smiling. The little master is bold and not afraid of strangers, Granny Zhao said with a smile. Han Yunqi seemed to have thought of something. She turned to Long Fei Yi and saw that Long Fei Yi was staring at his precious son. Granny Zhao, who was laughing, did not realize that she had said something wrong. Ning Jing hugged him for a while and said, Little Tang Tang is older than him by a year. She's his older sister. Ning Jing, why don't you stay here and let Madame Tang send little Tang Tang over? Han Yunqi suggested. Ning Jing smiled and did not answer. Han Yunqi did not know what she was planning, so she did not say much. Han Yunqi moved closer and stared at Tang Li. Tang Li was still indifferent and treated her like air. Han Yunqi did not say anything and just stared at Tang Li. In fact, Ning Jing would write to her every time Tang Li changed. She was very clear about Tang Li's situation. Tang Li's reaction to Ning Jing's words was a good sign. Perhaps, as time passed, Tang Li would react to Long Fei Yi, her, and even more familiar people, and he would gradually recover. Han Yunqi personally went to get the pear blossom teardrop rain. In the late stages of her pregnancy, she put away all the accessories and hidden weapons on her body. Only the bracelet Long Fei Yi gave her was left. Although the pear blossom teardrop rain was given by Long Fei Yi, it was designed by Long Fei Yi, who asked Tang Li to design it. Han Yunqi deliberately took away a few parts of the pear blossom teardrop rain and handed it to Tang Li. Before she could speak, Tang Li's originally empty eyes fell on the pear blossom teardrop rain. This slight change made everyone nervous. Ning Jing was the most excited. Just as she was about to speak, Han Yunqi signaled her not to be anxious with a look. Tang Li took the pear blossom teardrop rain and glanced at it. He actually opened his mouth and said, It's broken. It's broken. She had not heard this voice for a long time. For the past few months, Tang Li had not said anything other than repeating the sentence. I want to be quiet. I want to be quiet. How is it broken? Tang Li, tell me, how is it broken? Ning Jing choked. Tang Li did not answer. Instead, he took the pear blossom teardrop rain apart and looked at it before saying, It's missing 2 wires. The 2 parts that Han Yunqi casually took away were 2 special wires. Tang Li was dumbfounded. No one else could recognize it, but he could recognize and see through the hidden weapons he made himself. Ning Jing looked at Han Yunqi excitedly. At this moment, Han Yunqi was also excited. Even Long Fei Yi, who was sitting at the side, walked over quietly. Ning Jing asked carefully. Then can it be fixed? Yes. Tang Li was very sure. His dumbfounded expression turned serious. How do you fix it? Long Fei Yi interrupted. Tang Li did not answer. Ning Jing was anxious and asked again, Ali, where do you fix it? Tang Li did not answer. Instead, he fiddled with the pear blossom teardrop rain. Long Fei Yi wanted to ask more, but Han Yunxi stopped him and said in a low voice, How about this? Have the Tang clan send over all the hidden weapons that Tang Li personally made. Many people who suffered mental setbacks would forget everything and go crazy, but they wouldn't forget their professional skills. At the very least, they wouldn't reject them. Perhaps this would be a faster way to wake him up than Ning Jing alone. All right. Long Fei immediately went out to arrange things. He had Chu Shifeng give orders to the Tang clan while he found a pile of hidden weapons from somewhere. All of them were personally designed and made by Tang Li himself. Han Yunxi had never seen many of them before. When they piled up in front of Tang Li, they could clearly see the light in his eyes. Ning Jing was both agitated and sad. She teased herself, so in his heart, my daughter and I aren't even worth as much as this pile of scrap metal. Try harder and wake him up. Ask him yourself if this pile of scrap metal is more important, or you and your daughter. Han Yunxi smiled. As long as he wakes up, it's fine even if my daughter and I aren't important. Ning Jing looked back at Han Yunxi. Afraid that Han Yunxi wouldn't believe her, she added, It's true. I don't mind. Han Yunxi wanted to hug Ning Jing, but in the end she only patted her on the shoulder. She knew that Ning Jing was different from Mu Ling. Ning Jing only needed a pat on the shoulder to pull herself together, while Mu Ling needed someone to hug her and cry her heart out. Han Yunxi wanted to ask Ning Jing if she should let Mu Ling, and Lady Tang send little Tang Tang over. But Ning Jing didn't react when she mentioned the girl's name, so she couldn't bring it up again. If little Tang Tang was here, then Lady Tang would definitely come as well. It wasn't a big deal if Lady Tang came, but what about the rest of the Tang clan? Would Ning Jing be able to stay quietly by Tang Li's side then? Long Fei Yi ordered people to set up a small tent for Tang Li and Ning Jing in a secluded area behind rear camp. Tang Li and Ning Jing stayed there just like that. Tang Li was obsessed with the hidden weapons, dismantling and assembling them over and over again. Ning Jing didn't know anything about hidden weapons, so she asked some amateur questions at the beginning. Who knew that Tang Li would actually take the initiative to teach her how to design hidden weapons? Within a few days, Tang Li became more talkative. Unfortunately, he was only willing to talk to Ning Jing. Long Fei Yi came by a few times to ask about him, but Tang Li ignored him. When Ning Jing talked to him about hidden weapons, she would often suddenly ask him, Ali, do you know who I am? Tang Li shook his head. He didn't know that the woman in front of him was the Jing Jing that he often muttered to himself. And he didn't know that the woman in front of him was his wife. Ning Jing would always tell him, I am Jing Jing, Ning Jing. Tang Li would nod every time, but that was it. The next time she asked, he still didn't know anything. No matter what Tang Li said, Ning Jing was calm and gentle as always. However, she felt terrible behind her back. In the past, she could only hide and suffer. Now that she was in the military camp, she would go to Han Yunxi whenever she felt bad. She didn't complain or cry. She just chatted with Han Yunxi and teased little Rui. Her mood soon improved. With Ning Jing, a woman who had been through confinement, accompanying her, Han Yunxi suddenly felt that her confinement days weren't so boring. Time even seemed to pass faster. During the day, when Ning Jing was around, Long Fei Yi rarely went to accompany Han Yunxi and little Rui. He was busy paying attention to the epidemic in northern Li and the formation of the medical team. In the end, he couldn't resist going to the mountain behind rear camp alone. Chu Shifeng had long asked for the location of Gu Beiyue's group, so Long Fei Yi easily found the little house at the top of the mountain. It was currently evening. Spring was full of grass and flowers in the woods. Even under the setting sun, the scene was full of vitality. But Long Fei Yi saw a lifeless scene from a distance. Gu was sitting alone by the door, his entire body curled up in his black robes. Only his head was sticking out. His head was bowed, shrouded in the afterglow of the setting sun like a man in his twilight years. Long Fei Yi stood there for a long time, neither leaving nor approaching. Chapter 1185. Long Fei Yi stood by the side until the sky fell and the whole world darkened, but Gu didn't move at all. Rather than saying that he was an old man, it was better to say that he was a dead thing. Long Fei Yi finally walked over, but even when he stood in front of Gu still didn't notice him and buried his head in his black robe. Even though he was so close, Long Fei Yi still couldn't see his face. On the other hand, Gu Beiwei, who was in the room, sensed someone coming over. He came out and wasn't surprised to see Long Fei Yi. He knew that Long Fei Yi would come over sooner or later. "What's wrong with him?" Long Fei Yi asked. Gu Beiwei glanced at Gu, his eyes full of tenderness and love, as if he was looking at a child. He said, "He should be asleep, right? He often sleeps for 1 or 2 days in the past month." Long Fei immediately knitted his brows, while Gu Beiwei smiled helplessly. "I'm terrified. Perhaps he'll fall asleep and never wake up again. To him, that'll be the end of his torture." "Gu, wake up!" Long Fei Yi suddenly shouted fiercely. Unfortunately, Gu didn't move. Gu Beiwei didn't say anything and went back into the room to continue making medicine. He knew that Gu could disappear at any time and turn into a thorny tree, but he still hadn't given up. Long Fei Yi followed him in and saw that the room was full of medicinal herbs and Gu Beiwei's notes. Long Fei Yi pinched his brows and found a place to sit down. He asked, "Is there any progress with Mu Linga?" Long Fei Yi knew that Mu Linga had gone to Medical City. Han Yunqi didn't, and neither did Gu. It should be hopeless. A few days ago, Linger left Medical City to look for medicine. There's been no news of her for more than 10 days. Gu Beiwei looked rational, but he was the most irrational of them all. He knew that everything he was doing was futile, but he still worked day and night to make medicine. Like a child, he hoped for a miracle. Long Fei Yi fell silent. Gu Beiwei was immersed in his experiments as well. After a long time, Long Fei Yi said, "In 4 days, Rui'er will be 1 month old. I'm planning to bring Yunxi and Rui'er over here." Gu Beiwei's hand stiffened as he looked back. "Your Highness, will there be enough time?" That was what Long Fei wanted to ask the most. Was it in time? "Your Highness, we've already hidden it for so long. Don't make the princess sad. The little master's 1-month birthday is a joyous occasion, so we can't treat him unfairly," Gu Beiwei said. Long Fei Yi leaned against the wall and murmured, "It's too late. Han Yunqi won't be at ease for the rest of her life." Gu Beiwei was speechless. Unconsciously, he stopped what he was doing and sat down as well. The two of them fell into silence, even more silent than Gu outside the door. At the same time, Han Yunqi was still clueless about everything in the main tent of rear camp. Ning Jing had accompanied Han Yunqi for an entire day. After little Rui'er was taken away, only the two of them were left in the tent. Ning Jing finally spoke up. "Princess, I want to bring Tang Li back to the Tang clan." Han Yunqi had a complicated look in her eyes. It seemed that Ning Jing had originally planned to bring Tang Li back to the Tang clan. She was just passing by the military camp to see them. Han Yunqi nodded and didn't say much. Ning Jing smiled. "I miss my daughter. If we don't go back now, she'll really not acknowledge her parents. Tang Li is the only son of the Tang clan, and also the clan master. I can't bully him and not let him go back," Ning Jing added. "I understand," Han Yunqi replied. Tang Zijin and the entire Tang clan elder council are busy preparing for the construction of the imperial palace. They're all with Tian, and not the Tang clan. It's time for you to go back now. Ning Jing was silent for a long time before she said seriously, "Princess, I'll tell you one thing. No matter how difficult this trip is, I'll stay here until Tang Li recovers." "What about after Tang Li recovers?" Ning Jing clearly didn't finish her sentence, and the key point was in the second half of her sentence. Han Yunqi waited for a long time. Ning Jing seemed to want to say something, but she just smiled and said, "Okay, I'm going to pack. I'll leave early tomorrow morning." Han Yunqi had 1,000 words to say, but they were all in her heart. She secretly said in her heart, "Ning Jing, don't worry. With me here, I won't let the Tang clan owe you anything. Ning Jing had already risen to her feet when Han Yunxi muttered to herself, "If you guys go back, that girl Linger should be here by now." She thought that when Linger came, she would definitely ask about Gu's whereabouts. Ning Jing stopped and said suspiciously, "Linger left the Tang clan a long time ago. She was invited by Gu Beiyue to help out at Medical City." Han Yunxi, who was a little tired, was shocked. Medical City? Gu Beiyue? It's been a month, right? When she left the Tang clan, she sent me a letter saying that she was going to Medical City to help Dr. Gu prepare medicine, Ning Jing explained. Han Yunxi nervously grabbed Ning Jing's hand. What medicine? Who wants to use it? Gu Beiyue had been helping Gu find medicine to prepare medicine. Moreover, Su Donglin's letter didn't mention Mu Ling at all. Han Yunxi didn't have time to think about it, but she already felt that this matter wasn't simple. This matter must have something to do with Gu. Why did Gu Beiyue need Mu Linger's help? Didn't things go smoothly between Gu Beiyue and Gu? At this time, according to Su Donglin's message, Gu should have delivered the medicine. He and Gu Beiyue should be preparing the final antidote. Ning Jing didn't know anything about the situation and just casually mentioned it. She didn't expect Han Yunxi to be so agitated. She also realized that something was wrong. "Princess, what's wrong? Tell me quickly. What medicine is Mu Ling going to prepare for Gu Beiyue? Who is it for?" Han Yunxi didn't realize that her hands were trembling. However, Ning Jing found out. Ning Jing couldn't imagine how big of a deal this was to make Han Yunxi so scared before she understood the situation. "Tell me," Han Yunxi shouted anxiously. If Gu Beiyue asked Mu Ling for help because of Gu, it meant that the letter from Medical City was a lie. It meant that Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiyue, and Gu were all lying to her in the past few months after she left Medical City and gave birth to her. Why did they lie to her? If they couldn't find the medicine, then so be it. Wasn't Gu fine all along? The reason why they were looking for the medicine was to prepare for the eventuality. If they couldn't find the medicine, there was no need to hide it from her. Could it be that something happened to Gu? How serious was the matter that the three of them had to work together to deceive her? Han Yunxi's heart and mind were in a mess. She didn't dare to think further. The uneasiness in her heart grew bigger and bigger, almost swallowing her rationality. Ning Jing was frightened by her and couldn't speak for a long time. Outside, Granny Zhao heard the noise inside and hurried over. "Princess Yu, what's wrong?" Only then did Han Yunxi recover her wits and realize the situation she was in. However, she couldn't calm down. She still held Ning Jing's hand and asked seriously, "Ning Jing, why did Linger go to Medical City? Tell me everything you know, will you?" Ning Jing nodded and explained, "I don't know much. Linger told me that Dr. Gu invited her to Medical City to help with the prescription and asked her to hurry over as soon as possible. She said that Dr. Gu's patient is very dangerous." At this point, Han Yunxi suddenly let go of Ning Jing's hand and fell onto the warm couch. Ling originally wanted to wait for us to return before she left, but Dr. Gu said that if the medicine isn't prepared in a month or two, the patient won't live. When Ning Jing finished speaking, Han Yunxi's face turned completely pale. She seemed to have lost all her strength in an instant. She sat weakly on the warm couch and stared blankly at Ning Jing. Suddenly, tears filled her eyes and she cried, "Xiao Qi! It's Xiao Qi! It's Xiao Qi!" Wasn't it clear enough? Long Fei Yi and the other two were lying to her. They were all lying to her. The letters from Medical City were all fake. Liars. They're all liars. Han Yunxi's tears fell like rain. She didn't even bother to put on her shoes and stepped off the couch in her socks. "Where's Long Fei Yi? I want to see Long Fei Yi. Where's Long Fei Yi?" She rushed directly to the main tent. Ning Jing and Zhao Mama hadn't recovered from their shock. When they chased after her, Han Yunxi had already stepped into the snow. "Long Fei Yi, come out! Come out! Liars, you're all liars. You're lying to me again and again. You're lying to me again and again. Why are you lying to me?" The shadow guard and the servants in the rear camp chased after her. Zhao Mama and Ning Jing hurriedly came to pull her back. After all, the princess still had a few more days to officially finish her confinement. She couldn't come out, not to mention someone who was still in confinement. Even a normal person would freeze if they stepped in the snow with only a pair of socks. Moreover, the temperature outside was especially low at night. The north wind was very cold. How could she bear this? Zhao Mama had no idea what was going on. She was so anxious that she was about to cry. She took a thick fox fur cloak and wrapped it around the princess. She hugged her tightly. "Princess, no matter what happened, you must listen to this old servant's advice. Quickly go back." Ning Jing took a pair of cotton shoes and squatted in the snow to help Han Yunxi put them on. The servant girls didn't care if they would offend her, and all came to help. They held down Han Yunxi's hands and feet, afraid that she would move or struggle. Han Yunxi didn't move. She didn't have the strength to move. Her tears were like a broken dam, flowing uncontrollably. "I want to see Long Fei Yi. I want to see Long Fei Yi. I want to see Shao Qi. I want to see him. They can't do this. I want to see them. They can't lie to me like this. They can't. They think I'm a fool. I'm a fool. Ning Jing, I'm a fool. Sob sob, they're liars. I'm a fool. Ning Jing, did you know? Gu Beiyue's patient is Shao Qi. Did you know? If he had any other choice, Gu Beiyue would never ask Ling for help. He wouldn't." Han Yunxi cried until her insides were cut to pieces. Ning Jing stood rooted to the spot. She never expected things to turn out like this. "Where's Mu Ling? Does Mu Ling know that Gu Beiyue's patient is her Qi brother?" A group of servant girls surrounded Han Yunxi. Chu Shifeng had just returned from the outside and saw everyone gathered outside the tent. He hastily went over to ask what was going on, but no one was clear on what had happened. All they knew was that the princess wanted to see His Highness and Gu Qishao. Chu Shifeng was stunned by the news. He asked the person beside him, "Then what about His Highness?" "His Highness?" Chapter 1186. Where's His Highness? Nobody knew where Long Fei Yi had gone. Seeing the confused faces of the shadow guards, Chu Shifeng was so angry that he wanted to kick them. "Where's His Highness? Speak." Chu Shifeng demanded loudly. He'd only gone to the barracks to take care of some business today, but heaven knows what happened when he returned. How did the princess find out about Gu? And why wasn't His Highness here? His Highness disappeared last night. "We don't know where he went," one of the shadow guards said timidly. Another shadow guard was bolder and complained, "Boss, you know His Highness's temper too. If he doesn't let anyone know where he goes, we won't be able to find him even if we try." Chu Shifeng gave a start, then quickly turned and ran towards the back of the mountain, leaving the rest of his men at a loss. Chu Shifeng slapped himself twice to punish himself for his stupidity. The princess was still in her confinement period. His Highness wouldn't have left rear camp unless he had military business to take care of. Even if he did, he'd go to the Yuning barracks at most. His Highness wasn't there when he left the barracks, which meant he'd gone somewhere else. The back of the mountain. His Highness must have gone there alone to find Gu Beiyue and Gu. Chu Shifeng was so anxious that he'd forgotten to bring a torch. He flew up the mountain in the pitch-black woods, hoping to find His Highness as soon as possible. If the princess lost her temper or decided to go to Medical City on impulse, no one would be able to stop her. As Chu Shifeng ran up the mountain, Han Yunxi remained in the tent, sitting blankly. Her heart was filled with both grief and anxiety. Even when she cried, she didn't feel any relief. Just what's Gu's situation now? Is he still alive? According to Ning Jing, Mu Ling had left Medical City for almost a month now. Gu Beiyue had already concluded that Qishao only had 1 or 2 months left to live. What about now? The fact that Gu Beiyue was looking for Mu Ling meant that they had not been able to find the herbs and poisons they needed for the past few months. This was because when they were in Medical City, they had already determined the prescription. All that was left was to find the medicine, concoct the antidote, and experiment on the thorny vines. There was no need for Mu Linger to adjust the prescription. Han Yunxi could still remember the prescription clearly. For months ago, Gu Beiyue had given her a clear message that he had found all the ingredients that she was most concerned about, In the medical school's drug and poison warehouse, there were those kinds of drugs and poisons. As for the other herbs, it was not difficult for Gu to find them. Han Yunqi sat there in a daze, recalling carefully. She recalled all the letters she had received from Medical City in the past few months. The more she thought about it, the more upset she felt. A group of people surrounded her. They were all looking at her, afraid that she would rush out again. She wouldn't. She was waiting. She was waiting for Long Fei Yi to come see her and give her an explanation. She wanted to know what was going on with Gu Qixiao, too. Right now, she wasn't even in the mood to investigate how Long Fei Yi and the rest had tricked her. She only wanted to know how Gu was doing and whether he had any hope of survival. Han Yunqi was waiting for Long Fei Yi to return. Meanwhile, Chu Shifeng had finally followed the lights to the small building at the back of the mountain. As soon as he saw the light, he flew over without even noticing Gu hiding in the darkness by the door. Chu Shifeng didn't dare to shout from afar, but immediately shouted from the doorway, "Your Highness, something's happened. Something big has happened. The princess knows about Qi Xiao's situation." Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei both rose to their feet at the same time. Gu Beiwei asked coldly, "Who told her?" Chu Shifeng gave a start. He never expected Gu Beiwei to have such a cold side. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. He only felt that the Gu Beiwei in front of him was a complete stranger. Without a word, Long Fei Yi headed for the door. He had to get down the mountain as soon as possible. But Long Fei Yi had hardly reached the door when a familiar voice rose from beside him. "Long Fei Yi, I don't want to see her." The speaker was none other than Gu. His head was bowed, his voice so cold that it seemed to come from the depths of hell. "And also, her confinement period isn't over yet. If you dare let her take half a step out of the house, this old man won't forgive you even if I die." Chu Shifeng finally noticed Gu's presence. He stared at Gu, his heart stifled. "Gu, this doesn't look like a human at all." Long Fei Yi stopped walking, his voice icy. "Gu, when have you ever won against this crown prince?" Gu Qixiao slowly raised his head, only to see that his gorgeous face was covered in dark lines beneath his fair skin. These lines were none other than the roots of the thorny vines. They lay dormant, ready to sprout at any moment to grow out of Gu's face. Right now, Gu Qixiao's face was extremely ugly. One could even say it was hideous and terrifying. But no one was frightened. Gu Beiwei, Long Fei Yi, and Chu Shifeng all stared at him, and stared. Gu could still smile. He chuckled and said, "What are you looking at? This old man is ugly. You know it yourself." His voice was beautiful to begin with, but it was even more enchanting when he was smiling. But his face, Long Fei, didn't need to ask to know that Gu wouldn't last much longer. The thorny vines had already covered his entire body, leaving only his head. Once the vines grew out of his face and head, Gu Qixiao would be finished. Long Fei Yi didn't speak, but turned to leave. Gu cried out, "Long Fei Yi, take it as this old man begging you, all right?" "No." Long Fei Yi didn't even turn around. "Han Yunqi will decide for herself. You have no right to decide for her. That's this old man's own business." Gu shouted back, but Long Fei Yi still ignored him. It wasn't until Long Fei Yi's figure vanished into the night, and Chu Shifeng left as well, that Gu finally turned around and smiled at Gu Beiwei. His long, narrow eyes narrowed slightly as he smiled like the moonlight. He was as pure and simple as a child's. He said, "Gu Beiwei, see? This old man finally managed to trick Long Fei Yi for once before I die. It was worth it." Actually, Gu Beiwei hadn't told Long Fei Yi the truth. Gu only had an hour left to live. Long Fei Yi wouldn't make it in time to bring Han Yunqi up the mountain. Even if Chu Shifeng hadn't shown up, Gu Beiwei was already preparing to find an excuse to have Long Fei Yi leave. Long Fei Yi had never been soft-hearted towards Gu's requests, but Gu Beiwei had always been. Gu Beiwei really wanted to smile at little Qi, but Gu Beiwei didn't know what to say. But he couldn't bring himself to smile now. He furrowed his brows and looked at Gu with grief. "Seventh young master," he muttered. "Do you feel pain? Just how much did it hurt to be eaten alive by the vines? How long had Gu been in pain since they left Clear Breeze Peak? How much did it hurt? Why Why was he still smiling at the last minute? Seventh young master, doesn't it hurt? Gu Beiwe furrowed his brows as he shook his head. It doesn't hurt, Gu replied without hesitation. At this moment, a thorny vine suddenly shot out from his neck, breaking through his flesh. Gu's smile froze on his face before it quickly turned into a frown. He gritted his teeth and shut his eyes. He was in pain. So much pain. How could it not hurt? He was most afraid of pain. Very soon, another vine shot out from behind his ear. Gu was in so much pain that he struggled to open his eyes. He shrunk his neck back. However, it was useless even if he shrunk his neck back. After the two vines shot out, several more vines shot out one after another. As a matter of fact, a tinder bud had even sprouted from his cheek. Gu Beiyue's eyes were completely wet. He was waiting for Gu to open his eyes. However, Gu never opened his eyes. He allowed the vines to shoot out and grow in number. Xiaoqi, don't. The most composed Gu Beiyue finally broke down. He could no longer care about anything else. He lunged over and hugged Gu firmly. Xiaoqi, don't go. Don't go. Xiaoqi, I'm begging you, don't go. Xiaoqi, the princess will come and see you. The princess will definitely come and see you. Just wait for her. Xiaoqi, North Moon, Gu murmured. Gu Beiyue immediately stopped. He was afraid to make a sound. He even held his breath. North Moon, all right. Gu was completely exhausted. He could not even utter a single word. Gu Beiyue was afraid to make a sound, afraid that he would miss a single word. He listened for a very long time before finally hearing it clearly. Gu was crying out in pain again. He said, North Moon, it hurts so much. Two lines of tears flowed down from the corner of North Moon's eyes slowly. Gu Beiyue hugged Gu firmly. He was at a loss. He had run out of ideas. He had no idea what to do at all. All he could do was hug Xiaoqi and listen to Xiaoqi cry out in pain. Very soon, he could sense the vines all over Xiaoqi become restless. It was as if countless branches were ready to burst out. He was even afraid to look at Gu's face. However, he knew that the final moment had arrived. The most painful moment, the most torturous moment had also arrived. North Moon, it hurts so much. It hurts. Gu's voice was very, very soft, but Gu Beiyue heard it clearly. As a matter of fact, Gu Beiyue did not even know if the voice in his ears was the seventh young master's voice or if he was hallucinating. The voice tormented his heart. Finally, Gu Beiyue threw caution to the wind. He stood up and ran into the room, bringing out the last tiny portion of perplexing butterfly illusion that Han Yunqi had left behind. The perplexing butterfly illusion could not corrupt the poison Gu human by yanching. Perhaps it could corrupt Gu? After all, their constitutions were different. Gu Beiyue was unwilling to see Xiaoqi suffer this kind of torture until his death. He was reluctant. He would rather use the perplexing butterfly illusion to end Xiaoqi's pain and end it all. By the time Gu Beiyue brought back the perplexing butterfly illusion, he could no longer see Xiaoqi. All he saw were countless vines darting out from the black robes and growing wildly. Gu Beiyue was filled with grief. He did not know whether Xiaoqi was still alive or not, whether he was still conscious. He hated these vines to the core, so he casually poured the perplexing butterfly illusion down. At this moment, Long Fei had only just arrived in the tent, standing before Han Yunqi. Everyone had left. Only Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi remained in the large tent. Han Yunqi's eyes were red and swollen from crying. Long Fei Ye's eyes were filled with heartache. Han Yunqi stopped crying, nor did she question or blame him. She only said, Long Fei Yi, I want to see Gu. All right. Long Fei Yi agreed without the slightest hesitation. He knelt down on one knee beside her and personally helped her put on her boots. He fetched a large fox fur robe and wrapped her up tightly. He said, Let's go. I'll carry you there. As soon as they arrived at the entrance, they actually saw Mu Ling. Chapter 1187. No one expected Mu Ling to appear at this critical juncture. Han Yunqi was the most shocked. Wasn't Mu Ling in Medical City? Long Fei Yi only knew that Mu Ling had gone out to look for medicine, but he didn't expect her to come here. She was brought in by the Shadow Guard. Her body was covered in dust, and her delicate little face was full of fatigue. However, her big, clear eyes were still watery, and she had a smile on her face. It was especially moving. She had heard that a few patients in the neighboring county had contracted a disease similar to the plague years ago. She had specially rushed over to take a look, hoping that she could concoct the poison from that year. Unfortunately, her efforts had ended in failure. She had finished her business there and rushed over. The reason why she hadn't greeted her was because she wanted to give her sister a big surprise. She had even specially prepared a gift for her little nephew. Mu Ling stared at Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi suspiciously and asked, "Are you going out?" Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi didn't know how to answer. Mu Ling, however, became serious. "Sister, you can't be out of confinement yet, right? Going. Nothing is more important than confinement. If you fall ill in the future, I'm sure you'll regret it." On the side, Granny Zhao, Ning Jing, and the others didn't dare to make a sound. Mu Ling didn't realize that Ning Jing was beside them. She was clearly an inexperienced little girl, but she acted like an experienced woman, persuading Han Yunxi. "Are you going or not?" Long Fei Yi whispered. His subtext was, "Are you going to tell me or not?" Could Han Yunxi not tell him? Could she still hide it? She had hidden it from Mu Ling before because she didn't know about Gu's physical condition. If she didn't tell him now, when would she tell him? Would Ling still have a chance to see her Chi brother? Ling, did Gu Beiwei ask you to prepare the medicine? Han Yunxi asked. Mu Ling took a closer look and realized that her sister's eyes were red and swollen. It was obvious that she had cried. She suddenly felt uneasy. She nodded. "I went to look for medicine. It was nearby, so I took a detour." "Have you found the medicine?" Han Yunxi asked again. Mu Ling shook her head helplessly. "Difficult. What Gu Beiwei wants is the medicinal poison of the plague. Unless the medical school has it in stock, it will be very difficult to concoct it." Han Yunxi couldn't help tearing up. "That patient is very dangerous. If we can't find the medicine in the next few days, in my opinion, I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to escape death." As soon as Mu Ling finished her words, Han Yunxi burst into tears. Mu Ling became even more flustered. "Sister, what's wrong? Do you know that patient? Are they your friends?" Do I know them? Gu." Han Yunxi choked with sobs. In that instant, Mu Ling was stunned. It was as if she had been hit on the head with a hammer. Her entire mind was in a daze. She stood rooted to the ground, looking at her blankly. Gu, she muttered. She suddenly felt that this name was especially unfamiliar. She had forgotten how long it had been since she had last called out these 3 words. Gu Qi Xiao. As she muttered, bean-sized tears rolled down from her eyes. As she muttered, Gu became Brother Qi. But why did even the 3 words Brother Qi become unfamiliar? Mulinger looked up. Her eyes were full of tears. She looked at Han Yunxi and suddenly forced a smile through her tears. She said, "Sister, this joke isn't funny at all. Brother Qi's health is very good." Han Yunxi didn't know how to explain, nor did she have time. She said, "He's right behind the mountain. Let's go find him." As soon as she finished speaking, Mu Linger ran ahead of them, running very quickly. Long Fei chased after her, with Han Yunxi in tow. Chu Shifeng hurried after them, holding up a torch to lead the way for Mu Linger. By the time they reached the top of the mountain and saw the little house in the distance, the eastern skies had already begun to brighten. From a distance, Long Fei could see that a tall tree had appeared in front of the house. Its fan-shaped canopy resembled a giant umbrella that sheltered the house from the wind and rain. Long Fei stopped in his tracks. His heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. It hurt so much that he couldn't even move his feet. Han Yunxi and Mu Linger had never been here before, so they didn't know that the conspicuous tree in the distance didn't even exist before. They were still some distance away, so they couldn't see clearly what kind of tree it was. They only felt that it stood there like a guardian deity or a lonely person. "Xiaoqi lives there?" Han Yunxi asked. Long Fei didn't answer, but carried her on his back and walked over step by step. But as the distance grew closer, Han Yunxi gradually got a better look at the tree. Its trunk was made up of intertwined vines and thorns, while its crown was covered in a dense mass of red thorns. If one didn't look carefully, they might even mistake it for a cherry blossom tree. But Han Yunshi could see clearly that it was a thorny tree. As they walked up the mountain, Long Fei Yi had already told her about how Gu's body had been corroded by the thorns. Long Fei Yi, it's this tree, Han Yunshi murmured. Long Fei Yi carried her to the bottom of the tree and stopped. Han Yunshi waited for his answer, but he remained silent. Han Yunshi didn't ask any more questions. She looked up, her eyes red, just like Gu's coquettish red robe. Han Yunshi couldn't help but recall that year when Gu Qixiao had glanced back at her. He looked back and smiled at her. He said, "Poison girl, don't worry. I won't leave you behind unless I die." She had only taken it as a joke. Right now, she really wanted to ask him, "Gu Qixiao, your joke. Why did you take it so seriously? Why?" He meant every word he said to her. He had always meant every word he said. It was just that she didn't believe it. "Gu Qixiao, can you never take your joke seriously? Can you?" Han Yunshi's face was already covered in tears. Mu Ling-er's attention was on the house, but the doors and windows of this house were tightly shut. She knocked on the door, but there was no sound at all. She was puzzled and looked at Han Yunshi. "Sister, where's Qi brother?" Han Yunshi didn't answer her. She looked up at the patch of red above her head, her vision already blurred. Mu Ling-er looked up as well. She didn't know what was going on. She had never seen such a beautiful thorny tree. That fiery red color, so lively, it was hard to look away. "Sister, where's Qi brother? Why are you crying? Where's Qi brother? Tell me." Before Han Yunshi could answer, Mu Ling-er had no idea what was going on. Seeing her cry, she couldn't help but burst into tears as well. She struggled to look up at the thorny vines. She'd been a crybaby since she was a child. Qi brother had told her that when she wanted to cry, she just had to lift her head up high. Then the tears wouldn't fall. She'd never tried this method before. She just loved to cry, so why did she have to stop her tears from falling? It was only after she tried today that she realized that Qi Gij was lying. Looking at the red canopy, Mu Ling-er cried, "Qi brother, what do I do? My tears are still falling. Where are you? Tell Ling, or what should I do?" Long Fei Yi hung his head in silence. After a long time, he finally said to Chu Shifeng, "Go find Gu Beiwei." He didn't want to say a word. Let Gu Beiwei explain things to Mu Ling-er instead. Chu Shifeng knocked on the door, but there was no response. He forced the door open and froze at the sight of the person inside. He saw, inside the room, Gu Qixiao was lying quietly on the bed, his upper body bare. Only a random blanket was wrapped around his lower body. His skin and flesh were completely unharmed. Even his hair was in its original state. Chu Shifeng couldn't see his face as he lay sprawled on the bed. Gu Beiwei was standing on one side, concentrating on inserting needles into his arms. Gu didn't die? He didn't turn into a tree? Wasn't his body mostly eaten away by the thorny vines? How did he recover without a scratch? Chu Shifeng didn't have time to think. He turned to Long Fei Yi and exclaimed, "Your Highness, Qixiao didn't die. He didn't die. Qixiao's here." Mu Ling-er was the first to rush over. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi both turned back, their hearts almost stopping. They didn't dare to believe their ears, afraid that they'd heard wrong. "Qi big brother. Sob, just what's wrong with you? Qi big brother." Mu Ling-er suddenly wailed as she rushed inside. Seeing this, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi finally believed it. Han Yunshi wanted to get off and walk by herself, but Long Fei Yi didn't let her. He quickly carried her on his back until they reached the door and saw the real scene. Xiao Qi. Han Yunshi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She would never be able to forget this scene. Long Fei Yi silently exhaled as his head throbbed with pain. Still, he couldn't help but chuckle softly. While he wasn't paying attention, Han Yunshi struggled a bit before jumping off his back and running into the house. Mu Ling still didn't know a thing. She called out Qi big brother a few times, but Qi big brother didn't reply. She saw Gu Beiwei's brows furrow as he ignored her. She grew even more afraid and cried even louder. Han Yunshi didn't know what was wrong with Gu, but Gu's body was still fine. There were no traces of the thorny vines, so this had to be a good sign. It had to be. Han Yunshi immediately muffled Mu Ling, Er's mouth as soon as she arrived. She warned in a choked voice, "Don't disturb Gu Beiwe, or else I'll throw you out." Mu Ling didn't dare to move or make a sound. She realized that Gu Beiwe was saving Chi Big Brother, so she couldn't disturb him. The situation must be very urgent, so Gu Beiwe didn't bother with them. Mu Ling stood on one side, silently wiping away her tears. Han Yunshi stood on the other side, her eyes red from crying as she stared at Gu Beiwe's hands. Despite her proficiency with needles, she couldn't figure out what was going on. Long Fei Yi had somehow walked over to Han Yunshi's side and brought over a chair for her to sit down. A woman who hadn't finished her confinement couldn't stand for long. Long Fei Yi didn't linger in the room, but walked outside to breathe in the cold air and wake himself up. He stared at the thorny vines that had sprouted out of thin air and thought to himself. Chu Shifeng followed him outside. By now, he couldn't see much emotion on His Highness's face. Still, he couldn't help but say, "Your Highness, don't worry. Qi Xiao will definitely be fine. He'll definitely wake up." Long Fei Yi didn't say much, but ordered, "Send some men over and prepare a sedan chair to send them down the mountain." Chapter 1188. Han Yunshi and Mu Ling didn't understand what Gu Beiwe was doing, but their gazes never left Gu Beiwe's hands. Mu Ling, who didn't know a thing, felt her heart break into pieces. After a full 2 hours, Gu Beiwe finally spoke up. "Princess, Miss Ling, both of you should leave. It's inconvenient for you to stay here. Don't worry, 7th young master is fine." As Gu Beiwe spoke, his attention was still on Gu's body. His hands didn't stop moving either. Although his eyes were bloodshot, he was still focused and serious. Han Yunshi and Mu Ling, hearts settled back into their chests. The two sisters exchanged glances and smiled through their tears. They were both experts in the field and knew what Gu Beiwe meant. They quickly rose to their feet and left the room. Han Yunshi personally closed the door behind her. After breathing in the fresh, cold air, her head, which had been dizzy from crying, cleared up a little. By now, the sun had already lit up the entire mountain. The morning sun was warm and the air was fresh. Flowers bloomed all over the peak like a carpet of flowers. Long Fei Yi and Chu Shifeng were still under the thorny tree, tormenting the trunk. When he saw Han Yunshi and Mu Ling emerge, he walked over. He took off his cloak and prepared to drape it over Han Yunshi's shoulders. Han Yunshi refused and draped it over him instead. "I'm not cold, really." She was already wrapped in a thick fox fur robe, so she really wasn't cold. Moreover, 4th young Miss Ren had taken care of her personally. She hadn't been disturbed in the past 10 nights either, so her body and mind were recovering well. Women generally had 42 days to recover after giving birth, but the number varied from person to person. Some recovered quickly, while others took longer. Han Yunshi had a good understanding of her own body. "Chu Shifeng, it's cold on the mountain. Send the princess down first," Long Fei Yi instructed. Han Yunshi immediately explained her theory to Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi had no choice but to ask her to sit down. Gu Beiwe said that 7th young master is fine. Han Yunshi said hurriedly. Long Fei Yi had already guessed it. Otherwise, he would not have her treated. Mu Linger stood in front of the door, facing it tightly shut. Han Yunshi quickly pulled her over and told her everything. It would have been better if Mu Linger had not heard of Gu's immortal body. She knew that Gu's body had been corroded by the thorny vines for months. She knew that Gu had almost turned into the cold, thorny tree in front of her. Mu Ling finally burst into tears. "Sister, Chi brother is afraid of pain. Chi brother was very afraid of pain. Why didn't you tell me?" "Why?" Han Yunshi let her cry as she wished, unable to reply. She had only found out the truth today. Han Yunshi's heart still ached as she watched Mu Linger cry until her face was about to crumble. That's right. 7th young master was afraid of pain. What had 7th young master been through these past few months? She leaned against the wall and recalled how 7th young master and Long Fei Yi had told her multiple times that the imperial harem won't die. Her eyes still stung with jealousy. Just what kind of feelings did Gu Qi Xiao have to say those words to me? What kind of feelings did he have when he said to her, "Poison lass, I won't leave you behind unless I die"? Only now did Han Yunxi truly understand the weight of Gu Qixiao's promise. Xiao Qi's deepest impression of her wasn't his brilliant smile, but his words. Mu Ling'er couldn't stop crying, but Han Yunxi didn't cry. Han Yunxi's heart was filled with hope that Gu Qixiao would walk out of that room on his own and smile at them. He could complain about why she wasn't sad or crying, and he could laugh at Ling'er for being a crybaby. Han Yunxi stopped crying, but she knew that in the future, she'd remember little Qi's promise and everything that had happened today. She'd think of all that Qixiao had endured alone, and her face would be covered in tears just like Mu Ling'er's. They waited all the way until night fell. Long Fei had already sent the shadow guard over to set up a tent. Granny Zhao also came over to serve them and cook a big pot of hot food. Unfortunately, no one had any appetite as Gu wasn't awake yet. If Gu Beiwe hadn't said that Gu was fine, everyone would be panicking by now. At noon, Han Yunxi had Chu Shifeng deliver food to Gu Beiwe and told him to feed him. Gu Beiwe's acupuncture needles took energy, so he wouldn't wake up on an empty stomach. None of them had an appetite for dinner. Chu Shifeng was about to deliver food to Gu Beiwe when Gu Beiwe came out. Mu Ling'er ran in front and almost knocked Gu Beiwe over. How is it? How's Qi, big brother? Is he awake? Is he all right? Gu Beiwe's face was weary, but he still smiled gently at Mu Ling'er. "Miss Ling'er, don't worry. He's fine," he said. He told Chu Shifeng to stand guard in the room while Mu Ling'er went to the tent. He had something to discuss. Mu Ling'er wanted to see Qi, big brother, but she also wanted to know the details of Qi, big brother's condition. She couldn't decide. "You can't go. His body is covered in needles," Gu Beiwe said, then told Chu Shifeng, "Light up the other 2 stoves as well. Don't let Qixiao catch a cold. He's very weak right now." Mu Ling'er immediately blushed. She knew that Qi, big brother, was probably still naked right now. She turned back and asked, "Then when can we go?" "Tomorrow," Gu Beiwe said mildly. No one would know that last night. He was such a calm and rational person. However, he hugged little Seven and cried so sadly. Using up the perplexing butterfly illusion was the most irrational thing he'd done. When they returned to the tent, Gu Beiwe didn't even bother to eat before explaining last night's events to Han Yunxi and the rest. Han Yunxi personally placed a bowl of steaming hot soup in front of him. Only then did he comply and drink a bowl of it. Now that Gu Beiwe was out, everyone could eat in peace. They chatted as they ate. Gu Beiwe summarized Xiao Qi's condition in a single sentence. He didn't want anyone to know what kind of torture Xiao Qi had suffered last night, nor did he want to recall it. He only told them in detail about Xiao Qi's reaction after he used the perplexing butterfly illusion. When the perplexing butterfly illusion fell, all of the thorny vines were corroded, leaving nothing behind. However, a red liquid was left behind. It looked very much like blood, but it wasn't blood at the same time. He despaired, only to discover that as the vines disappeared, Gu's flesh was gradually recovering. The vines had been corroded, but it looked more like they had withdrawn from Gu's body. When Gu's body completely reappeared, there was only a puddle of red liquid on the ground that looked like blood. He immediately checked Gu's pulse and found that it wasn't much different from normal. The only difference was that it was very weak, and his heartbeat was almost non-existent. He couldn't be bothered with the puddle of red liquid on the ground. He brought Gu into the room and immediately used acupuncture to protect his heart. After performing the acupuncture, he checked 3 times and was finally certain that 7th young master's life wasn't in danger. Mu Ling'er was stunned and kept sniffling. Han Yunxi hurriedly said, "That red liquid took root in the soil and grew into a thorny tree?" Gu had noticed the thorny tree at the door and nodded. "Princess, that red liquid should be the plant essence in 7th young master's body. Why is the perplexing butterfly illusion the antidote?" Long Fei also spoke up. When Han Yunxi left Medical City, she had handed the perplexing butterfly illusion to Gu Beiwe. The antidote was in their hands, but they had been busy for several months without knowing. It was truly helpless. This is also something this humble one doesn't understand. In terms of medicine, we still have to wait for seventh young master to wake up and figure out together with Ling Er. Medicinal herbs and poisonous plants are mutually reinforcing and counteracting, and perplexing butterfly illusion is made from a mixture of withered plants. Looking at it carefully, it's not strange that perplexing butterfly illusion can cure seventh young master's undying body. Gu Beiwei said seriously. However, this humble one speculates that if Shao-Chi hadn't turned into thorny vines, perhaps the perplexing butterfly illusion wouldn't have ended up like this. Han Yunqi wanted to say the same thing. If Gu's body hadn't been corroded by the thorny vines and used perplexing butterfly illusion, perhaps it wouldn't have hurt him at all. No one could say for sure. Moreover, Gu had used perplexing butterfly illusion last night after testing out various medicinal herbs. Would the remnants of those herbs in his body have any effect on the thorny vines? If they followed the formula from before and found the antidote for the plague, how much weaker would it be compared to the perplexing butterfly illusion? That was a question for Gu and Mu Ling to solve. Even so, they might not be able to figure it out. It wasn't easy to get the antidote for the plague. In any case, seventh young master had already recovered. Han Yunqi would rather never create an antidote than see a plague as large as the one from the past erupt in Cloud Realm Continent again. Mu Ling sobbed. Big sis, thank goodness you still kept the perplexing butterfly illusion. Otherwise, sob. Han Yunqi rejoiced as well. Seventh young master's body is still very weak. We have limited medicinal ingredients here, so I have to take him back to Medical City. I'm afraid he'll have to soak in the medicinal soup for a while. Gu Beiwei said seriously. I'll go with you. Mu Ling said anxiously. Gu Beiwei nodded helplessly. We'll still need Miss Ling to write up a few prescriptions. Mu Ling eyes were still wet as she nodded. She was both upset and surprised, unable to calm down. Gu's affairs had finally come to an end. Gu Beiwei estimated that it'd be at least a month before Gu woke up. Tonight, however, everyone missed his brilliant, unrestrained smile. After the meal, Gu Beiwei stood up and bowed to Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi. Congratulations to your highness and princess on the birth of son. It was only then that Mu Ling remembered that she was here to see her little nephew. She said, Big sis, can I go see little tomorrow? Let's go down the mountain together tomorrow. Although Han Yunqi missed her son after not seeing him for a day, she still wanted to accompany Gu with Gu Beiwei and Mu Ling Long Fei Yi didn't have much of an opinion. Everyone stayed on the mountain for the night. The next morning, Mu Ling and Han Yunqi both saw Gu. His face was still as beautiful as ever. His long, narrow eyes were closed, and his eyelashes were long. Gu Beiwei helped him change into a white brocade robe. His quiet appearance made him look like a noble young master, the big brother next door. Chapter 1189. Han Yunqi and Mu Ling circled around the unconscious Gu, while Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei stood beneath the thorny tree. The two of them had been studying the thorny tree since last night. Just like Gucci Xiao's, it couldn't be poisoned to death or burned to death. This further proved Han Yunqi's theory of plant essence. This thorny tree had been born from the plant essence in Gu's body, so it naturally inherited Gu's undying and indestructible body. More specifically, it wasn't undying or indestructible, but its immunity was higher than other creatures and its lifespan was much longer. Long Fei Yi suddenly unsheathed his sword and used the lust-bite energy to hack at a few thorny vines. A single slash was all it took to shatter the thorny vines. Han Yunqi and Mu Ling both looked back. Han Yunqi grinned and said, Long Fei Yi, this tree belongs to Gu. You can't damage it. Long Fei Yi saw that Han Yunqi was in a good mood, so he was too lazy to argue with her. Han Yunqi's words reminded Gu Beiwei of something. He quickly added, Your Highness, it's better to send someone to guard this tree. If the plant essence falls into someone else's hands, it'll be as troublesome as the poison sects poison Gu humans. If plant essence could turn a person into an undying and indestructible body, then countless ambitious people in the world would fight over it. How many immoral doctors would use people for experiments? This matter had to be kept a secret, and this tree had to be protected. Long Fei Yi had long thought of this point. Last night, he'd left the task to Chu Shifeng. He wasn't just going to guard the tree, but the mountain as well. Otherwise, the tree would be too suspicious. This was a military base, so it wouldn't raise any suspicions if he sent someone to guard the mountain. At noon that day, Han Yunxi and the others returned to the barracks. Gu was settled in his tent. When Ning Jing saw that they had returned, and that Gu was fine, she finally felt relieved. It was only then that Mu Ling realized that both Ning Jing and Tang Li were in the military camp. She did not mention much about Chi brother. Instead, she dragged Ning Jing to tell her about Tang Tang's interesting stories. Little Tang Tang was 1 year old and was at the age when she was very cute. There's always a basket of interesting things to talk about in the letters. While everyone was in the camp, Ning Jing called Tang Li over to let Gu Beiyue take a look. Tang Li still treated everyone as heir. She sat beside Ning Jing in a daze. Gu Beiyue could do nothing about mental trauma. No matter how good he was, he couldn't prescribe medicine that could cure mental trauma. However, Gu Beiyue still pretended to do some tests and gave Ning Jing some good news so that Ning Jing could see hope. Ning Jing was Tang Li's medicine. Gu Beiyue had to let Ning Jing see hope so that Ning Jing could persevere. Since he has memories of hidden weapons and doesn't reject them, I suggest that you go back to the place he's most familiar with. Gu Beiyue was not lying. He was serious. Ning Jing nodded. If it weren't for Gu's incident, she would have gone back to the Tang sect with Tang Li today. Sister Jing, don't worry. Mrs. Tang doted on Tang Tang very much and took very good care of her. She's even nagging every day about why you're not back yet. Mu Ling hurriedly said, I'm preparing to go back, Ning Jing said indifferently. Mu Ling looked apologetic. Sister Jing, I can't accompany you anymore. I have to go to Medical City with Chi brother. Silly girl, I didn't ask you to accompany me. Ning Jing didn't hold back. Mu Ling had bumped into her at Three-Way Black Market and almost caused her to have a miscarriage. She had been with her for long enough. Now, it wasn't Mu Ling who owed her anything. On the contrary, she owed Mu Ling a favor. Although Ning Jing didn't say it, she knew very well in her heart. At this moment, Han Yunxi thought of something and smiled. Ning Jing, Tang Li still owes Ling a debt. Mu Ling and Ning Jing looked confused. They obviously didn't know about this. Back at Three-Way Black Market, Tang Li said that the Tang sect would prepare a generous dowry for Ling when she gets married. Han Yunxi said seriously. Back then, Tang Li was grateful to Mu Ling for faking her pregnancy. Even if it meant ruining his own reputation, he would still protect Ning Jing. A girl's reputation was priceless. This favor was more important than anything else. I'll remember it, Ning Jing said seriously. Han Yunxi looked at Tang Li and asked jokingly, Sect Master Tang, you can't go back on your word. Han Yunxi was just joking. Unexpectedly, Tang Li suddenly looked at her thoughtfully. This time, everyone was shocked. Unfortunately, Tang Li only looked at Han Yunxi for a while and didn't have any other reaction. Miss Jing, when you return to the Tang sect, perhaps you can tell Sect Master Tang more about the past. Treat him as someone with amnesia, Gu Beiyue said. Ning Jing nodded seriously and remembered it. Everyone was pleasantly surprised by Tang Li's change, but they didn't notice Mu Ling's gloomy eyes. At the mention of dowry, she remembered her promise with Jin Zi. She had promised to marry Jin Zi and return to Wintercrow with him. Jin Zi had also promised to give her a year. If Chi brother still didn't like her, she had to go with him. A year was so long, but she clearly didn't feel like much time had passed. Why was the date of the promise almost here? The deadline was in 2 months. Mu Ling really didn't know what to do. She shook her head and decided to forget about it for now. In the next month or two, she had to take good care of Chi brother. As they chatted, Granny Zhao carried Ray over. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi stood up at the same time. Both of them wanted to carry him, but Han Yunxi let Long Fei Yi have him. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi stepped back and said calmly, "You carry him." Although he hadn't seen his precious son for a day, Long Fei Yi still missed him dearly. Why didn't he carry him all of a sudden? Of course, only Han Yunxi and Granny Zhao knew the reason. Mu Ling quickly ran over. Sister, let me see, let me see. Rui, who was almost a month old, no longer looked like a newborn with wrinkled skin. Instead, he had transformed into an extremely adorable child. His skin was as fair and delicate as if it had been washed with milk. His small features were exquisite and adorable. At this moment, he was staring curiously at Mu Ling. Mu Ling couldn't take her eyes off him. After a while, she suddenly said, Sister, I want to have my own child too. Han Yunxi smiled helplessly. All right, get married first. Han Yunxi was still thinking about Mu Ling, and Jin Zi. However, she had been too busy recently. When she was free, she had to find out more about Jin Zi's situation in Northern Li. She couldn't be bothered to interfere in other people's affairs, but she had to care about Mu Ling's affairs. If she didn't care, who knew if this girl would be abducted? Sister, can I hold him for a while? Mu Ling blinked her big eyes and pleaded. 2 hugs is fine too, Han Yunxi teased. Mu Ling was overjoyed. She loved children, and this was her sister's son and her nephew. How could she not love and dote on him? She excitedly took Rui from Han Yunxi's arms. Her movements were more skillful than Han Yunxi's as a mother. After all, she had personally taken care of little Tang Tang from birth until he was almost 1 year old. She was good at holding children and even better at coaxing them. Sister, look, isn't afraid of strangers. Mu Ling was overjoyed. Who knew that just as she finished speaking, Rui actually grinned at Mu Ling. His smile melted Mu Ling's heart. Sister, look, Rui likes me. He's smiling at me. He's smiling at me. Mu Ling was very excited. Granny Zhao was happy and excited when she saw the little master smile. She couldn't stop smiling. Miss Ling, the little master is bold and isn't afraid of strangers. If he smiles, it means he likes you. If he cries, it means he definitely doesn't like you. Granny Zhao, you're spouting nonsense. How can crying mean he likes me? Mu Ling retorted. Her words caused a burst of laughter. Granny Zhao didn't mind and smiled foolishly. This old servant is so happy that I'm muddle-headed. Granny Zhao had been happy ever since the little master was born. She was still immersed in joy even now. Granny Zhao was indeed muddle-headed. Otherwise, she would have noticed that her first master, Long Fei Yi, was standing at the side with an ugly expression on his face. The reason Long Fei Yi didn't hug Rui earlier was because he was afraid that Rui would cry in front of everyone. Mu Ling couldn't bear to let go of Rui once she hugged him. If it wasn't for the fact that she had to take care of Gu, she would definitely have stayed in the military camp. She teased Rui, making funny faces and tickling him. Rui giggled until he burped in the end. Gu Beiwa walked over and gave the little master a serious look. His soft eyes grew even softer as he doted on the boy. It was enough to make one drown in his gaze and dream of a lifetime of beautiful dreams. Dr. Gu, do you want a hug? Mu Ling asked. Gu Beiwa wanted to, but he didn't dare to. Hug him. He'll definitely like you too. Mu Ling smiled. He'll definitely like you. Hurry up and hug him. Han Yunxi urged. She didn't want to hurt Long Fei Yi, but wanted to verify once again whether was afraid of strangers. Who knew that when Gu Beiwa carefully carried actually didn't cry and even grinned at him? That's strange. How is this being afraid of strangers? He's so young, yet he doesn't know how to be afraid of strangers. He clearly doesn't like his father. She didn't know about babies. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi's sullen face and suddenly realized that there was finally a man in this world who could control Long Fei Yi. That was his precious son. Gu Beiwa still knew his manners and returned to Mu Ling after a while. Mu Ling didn't care about the rules. She wanted to hug him to her heart's content before leaving. She turned back to look at Han Yunxi and smiled slyly. Sister, we're leaving tomorrow. I'll sleep with tonight. Okay? Han Yunxi gladly agreed. One night was too short. It was finally time to say goodbye again. Before Gu Beiwa left, Long Fei Yi mentioned the matter of Medical City and Medicine City, joining forces with the military to rush to the northern part of Northern Li to relieve the disaster and fight the plague. Gu Beiwen knew Long Fei Yi's ultimate goal. He said faintly, "Your Highness, don't worry about preparing for the ascension. Leave it to me." Long Fei Yi said softly, "I hope you can hold the position of head of the Imperial Hospital and Grand Tutor. What do you think?" Chapter 1190. Head of the Imperial Physician Courtyard and Grand Tutor at the same time? Gu Beiwe was undoubtedly the head of the Imperial Physician Courtyard, but he was still a little fearful of the position of Grand Tutor. The Grand Tutor was the Imperial Tutor. Not only was he the Emperor's teacher, but he was also the Crown Prince's teacher. This was a heavy responsibility. A complicated look flitted past Gu Beiwe's eyes, but he still nodded. "Many thanks for your Highness's appreciation. This one." Long Fei Yi cut him off. "Think it over before you answer me. There's no rush." Gu Beiwe nodded. "All right." Gu Beiwe and Mu Ling took Gu back to Medical City, while Ning Jing and Tang Li headed for the Tang clan. Only Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi's family remained in rear camp. The temporary capital of Yuning Prefecture was more or less finished, and the Imperial Palace was built on the old site of the government offices. Everyone assumed that Long Fei Yi would proclaim himself emperor on his son's 1-month-old birthday. But Long Fei Yi only moved into Yuning Palace on Rue Er's 1-month-old birthday. This time, everyone began to speculate. Besides Northern Li, the rest of Cloud Realm continent was still in Long Fei Yi's hands. Everything was in place. So why hadn't Long Fei Yi proclaimed himself emperor? What was he waiting for? Both the East Qin camp and the East Qin camp were waiting for Long Fei Yi to pay his respects at the East Qin mausoleum and acknowledge his ancestors before reviving the East Qin Empire and proclaiming himself emperor. Meanwhile, the Western Qin camp was worried. If Long Fei Yi revived the East Qin Empire, where would Western Qin stand? Does the princess care about this matter? Long Fei Yi's lack of movement and Han Yunqi's silence made both sides uneasy. The West Qin camp didn't care. Whether Long Fei Yi revived the East Qin or the Great Qin, it didn't affect them much. They were all hoping that Long Fei would proclaim himself emperor as soon as possible so that he could be rewarded according to his merits. Han Yunqi was probably the only one who knew what Long Fei was waiting for. On Rue Er's 1-month-old birthday, all factions sent him gifts of heavenly treasures and extravagant gifts. Long Fei Yi didn't even look at them, but had Zhao Mama bring her over so he could eat with Han Yunqi. He personally ordered someone to take out the treasured sword, Ice Stream, from the hidden sword pavilion of Tianshan Mountain and give it to Rue Er. Long Fei Yi, Er's father. Long Fei Ye's father. Ye's father. In fact, there was only one reason Long Fei Yi hadn't proclaimed himself emperor yet. He was waiting for the plague in Northern Li to end and the war to end. He didn't want to start a new empire while the plague was running rampant in the north, nor did he want to establish a new country while Ningcheng was still on the battlefield. Ningcheng hadn't returned yet. When he proclaimed himself emperor, the D clan would definitely come to bother Han Yunqi. He had a bet with Ningcheng, and the internal affairs of the D clan would be left to Ningcheng to deal with. As soon as Long Fei Yi gave permission for Ningcheng to send troops, Ningcheng immediately set out with limited provisions, and more provisions were on the way. Vice Academy head Shun of Medical City had already sent a medical team of more than 20 people to Northern Li to support Ningcheng. Ningcheng wasn't going to war, but disaster relief. In that case, medical teams and medicinal ingredients were more important than soldiers and provisions. If Rui wasn't so young, Han Yunqi would have personally organized a medical team and rushed to Northern Li. She couldn't travel far, but she didn't idle around either. While Long Fei Yi was busy with military and government affairs, she personally took charge of the distribution of medicinal ingredients and acted as the middleman between Medicine City and Medical City. She was the disciple of the King of Medicine in name and had a deep friendship with the Old Man of Alchemy. In addition, the great clans in Medicine City had received support from her and Long Fei Yi. Thus, when she asked for medicinal ingredients, no one in Medicine City refused. On the contrary, many clans took the initiative to deliver them. Regarding the cost of medicinal herbs, everyone expressed their willingness to contribute to the disaster relief. Han Yunshi didn't refuse these free ingredients and accepted them all. The clans in Medicine City were well off to begin with. Even if they provided a few more batches of medicinal ingredients, it didn't mean much to them. On the other hand, no matter how rich Long Fei Yi was, he would save where he could. Moreover, the Long Fei Yi had spent an incalculable amount on military pay and provisions in the past 2 years. After so many years of war, the national treasuries of Tian and Tianing and Western Zhou were all empty. Even after conquering these 3 countries, they hadn't taken much silver from them. Leaving aside the rebuilding of the country after the war, just rebuilding Yuning Palace and Tian An's Imperial Palace would cost a lot of silver. Where would all this money come from? Some came from Long Fei Ye's own pockets, while others came from Jiangnan's financial clans and aristocratic families. The southern military had the fewest military achievements, so why were they so confident in their words in the military world? It was all because they were backed by large financial clans. Han Yunshi knew that money would be needed everywhere once the country was established. She didn't know what kind of bottomless pit Cloud Realm's finances would be after the war. She only knew that she should save as much money as she could for Long Fei Yi. She was even beginning to look for new sources of income for Long Fei Ye's national treasury. Actually, the medical market was a good way to earn money, but once the imperial court took control of the medical industry, it would no longer be profitable. Even if it was a good source of income, Han Yunshi wouldn't set her sights on the medical industry. If she wanted to make money, she couldn't earn it from the common people. In her heart, Han Yunshi set her sights on the large clans and financial clans of Jiangnan. Of course, this was all for later. With Han Yunshi personally taking charge of the investigation, everything went smoothly. After Gu Beiwei and Mu Ling brought Xiaoqi back to Medical City, Gu Beiwei arranged for Xiaoqi to stay in his back courtyard. After a long discussion with Mu Ling he finally settled on a prescription. Gu Beiwei said that ordinary ingredients would do, but Mu Ling insisted on premium ingredients. She even personally brought them over from the Medical City's Mu family. Thanks to Mu Linger and Han Yunshi's relationship, the Mu clan was finally able to regain their footing in Medicine City. Mu Yingdong was still in jail, so Mu Linger's half-brother, born of a concubine from a different mother, was in charge of the clan. That brother treated Mu Ling like a bodhisattva and granted her every request. While Gu Beiwei was busy with Gu, he was also busy with the formation of a medical team. So far, Medical City had only sent out 2 medical teams. This was far from enough to deal with the rapidly spreading epidemic. 10 days after returning to Medical City and confirming that Gu's condition had stabilized, Gu Beiwei left Gu in Mu Ling's care. With the assistance of a medical assistant, Mu Ling was able to complete the daily tasks of changing the medicinal decoction and administering acupuncture. One afternoon, Mu Ling personally boiled a large pot of medicinal decoction. After changing the decoction in the tub, she had a servant carry Gu away. Gu had to soak in the decoction for 2 to 4 hours every day. Gu Qishao sat quietly in the wooden tub with his eyes closed as if he'd fallen asleep. Mu Ling had everyone withdraw and personally close the door. Like every day in the past, she moved a chair to sit beside the tub, leaned her arms against the edge of the tub, and stared at her Qi brother. She had to admit that her eyes were restless. Not only did she look at Qi brother's face, but she also couldn't help but look down at Qi brother's chest several times. Qi brother's upper body was bare. His figure was so good that Mu Ling blushed. Mu Ling knew that this was the only chance in her life that she could be with Qi brother every day. She could look at him so closely and accompany him day and night. When Qi brother woke up, he would still run away, and she would have to face Jinzi. In the past, she always hoped that Qi brother would grow old. Who knew that Qi brother was immortal? Now, Qi brother was not immortal. Unfortunately, she might not be able to wait until he ran out of energy. Qi brother, what do you think I should do? In addition to looking at Gu, Mu Ling had been talking to Chi brother for the past few days. It was because she knew that he couldn't hear her and wouldn't answer that she dared to say anything. Chi brother, Ling, doesn't want to break her promise. Ling made the promise herself. Linger knows that she's stupid, but Chi brother, Jean Z is not a bad person. Actually, Jean Z has a good heart. Chi brother, if I didn't promise Jean Z, he would threaten me. Jean Z will use me to threaten my sister. He won't have a good ending. So, I could only promise him. Chi brother. As Mu Linger spoke, she slowly tilted her head and looked at Gu helplessly and affectionately. Chi brother, Linger wants to marry you. I want to have children with you. Do you know that? After saying this, Mu Ling immediately realized that she was stupid again. When she left Northernly, Chi brother had hinted to her that it was impossible for them to be together. Chi brother had always known that she liked him. Chi brother wasn't stupid. If Gu heard Mu Linger's words, how would he feel? He probably wouldn't feel anything. He knew Mu Linger's thoughts better than anyone else. He would probably feel that it was too noisy, right? Just like that, Mu Ling nagged beside Gu for a whole hour. It wasn't until the medicine boy came in to heat up the medicine that she stopped and ran to drink some water. This medicine boy was about 12 or 13 years old. He was sent here personally by Gu Beiyue and was very smart and sensible. Usually, he would leave immediately after finishing his work and wouldn't delay. However, today's matter was already over, but he stood aside and didn't leave. Is there something else? Mu Linger asked. The medicine boy stammered. Big Sister Linger, actually, I just speak frankly. There are no outsiders here. Mu Ling never put on airs in front of the medicine boy. Big Sister Ling, my father made a bet with someone and bet a lot of money. I wanted to secretly ask you if my father would win or lose, said the medicine boy. Mu Ling was suspicious. What bet? Is it related to me? It's, the medicine boy said timidly. It's related to Principal Beiyue. Everyone outside is betting on whether or not he'll marry the Qin family's young miss. What did you say? Mu Ling was very surprised. It's been going around since a few months ago. It said that Principal Beiyue sent someone to the Qin family as a matchmaker. However, there hasn't been any news even now. So many people have set up bets. My father is betting that Principal Beiyue won't marry the Qin family's young miss. That wheelchair-bound young miss of the Qin family. Mu Ling asked in surprise. She was quite familiar with the situation of the great clans in Medical City. The medicine boy immediately nodded. Mu Ling was even more shocked. She ran out without another word. She naturally went to find Gu Beiyue. Chapter 1191. When Mu Ling ran to Gu Beiyue's study, Gu Beiyue had just finished discussing the matter of dispatching a medical team with several vice directors and elders. Gu Beiyue had already decided to personally go to Northernly. Although Mu Ling was carefree, she was still a little shrewd. Seeing that everyone was still there, she didn't say anything and just waited on the side. Seeing that she was waiting, everyone excused themselves. Gu Beiyue hurriedly asked, Miss Linger, what's wrong? Did something happen to 7th Young Master? The reason why Gu Beiyue could hand Gu over to Mu Linger was because he was certain that Gu would be fine, so he wasn't worried. Mu Linger saw that there was no one around, but she was still worried. She pulled Gu Beiyue to a corner and asked in a low voice, I heard that you're going to marry the eldest daughter of the Qin family? Gu Beiyue was stunned at first, but then he smiled and directly nodded. Yes, it's really true. Mu Linger was scared out of her wits. Not to mention the eldest daughter of the Qin family who was in a wheelchair. Even the best woman in Medical City wasn't worthy of Gu Beiyue. He was young and promising, good-looking, gentle, held a high position, had a noble status, was skilled in martial arts, and had superb medical skills. How could such a man be worried about not being able to find a wife? Seeing Gu Beiyue's faint smile, Mu Linger knew that he wasn't joking. She looked at Gu Beiyue seriously and asked, Why? Miss Linger, this is a private matter. Let's not talk about it. I'll be leaving for Northernly tomorrow. Come with me to see 7th Young Master. Gu Beiyue kindly refused to answer. Mu Linger didn't let go. Dr. Gu, Do you have some difficulties? Did someone force you? Why is that? No one forced me. I like Miss Chin and want to marry her. It's that simple, Gu Beiwei explained. Mu Ling couldn't believe it. Do my sister and His Highness know? Miss Ling, this is my personal matter. When the wedding date is set, this one will inform the princess and His Highness. Gu Beiwei became serious. What he meant was that even his master, Han Yunxi, couldn't interfere with his private affairs. Mu Linger understood, but she still felt that something was wrong. She glanced at Gu Beiwei a few times, but didn't ask much. However, she secretly decided that she must tell her sister and His Highness about this matter. She was sure that Gu Beiwei had a reason for doing this. Gu Beiwei hadn't seen Xiao Qi for several days. As soon as he saw Xiao Qi, he found that Mu Linger took very good care of him. Mu Ling even helped Gu comb his hair neatly. After recuperating for so long, Gu's body recovered quite well. Gu Beiwei carefully examined him again before telling Mu Ling he'll be fine after soaking for another 10 days or so. The medicine is also poisonous, so it's not good for his body if he soaks in it for too long. When the time comes, follow the acupuncture technique I taught you and perform acupuncture on him every morning. He fell into a coma because his body was weak. He'll definitely wake up when he regains his vitality and strength. In my opinion, he should be able to wake up at the beginning of next month. There is still half a month until the beginning of next month. Mu Linger was so surprised that she didn't know what to say. She just looked at Gu and smiled. Gu Beiwei was amused by Mu Linger's reaction. He said, Linger, talk to Xiao Qi more. He should gradually regain consciousness. Maybe he can hear you. Mu Linger was stunned at first when she heard this. Then, she turned around with her back facing Gu. Her entire face instantly flushed red. Heavens, she had told Qi brother a lot of her heartfelt thoughts recently. She even said that she wanted to help Qi brother bear a child. Mu Linger wanted to bang her head against the wall in front of her and knock herself out. Seeing Mu Linger's embarrassed look, Gu Beiwei could roughly guess what had happened. He pretended that he didn't know anything and smiled faintly. Linger, I'll leave 7th young master in your care. I'll be leaving now. If Mu Linger was smart enough, she should be able to understand what Gu Beiwei meant by guard. Unfortunately, Mu Linger wasn't smart enough. She was immersed in her own embarrassment and couldn't care less about what Gu Beiwei was saying. 5 days after Gu Beiwei left Medical City, Mu Linger personally went to the wilderness to look for a few medicinal herbs. When she returned, she found that the large wooden tub was empty and Gu was gone. Mu Linger stood in place for a long time. Only when the medicine boy came in and couldn't find Gu Beiwei did she regain her senses. She hurriedly opened the wardrobe. Sure enough, the red robe she had specially prepared for him was gone. Mu Linger stood in front of the open wardrobe in a daze as tears slowly flowed down her face. Qi brother, you abandoned me again. You abandoned me again. Mu Linger cried as she ran out of the backyard and out of the medical academy. She left Medical City on the same day and headed in the direction of Yuning Palace to look for him. She knew that once Gu woke up, he would definitely look for her sister. But who knew that when Mu Linger rushed day and night and arrived at Yuning Palace, she found that Qi brother wasn't there. Moreover, her sister didn't even know that Qi brother had woken up. Then where is he? Han Yunxi was very surprised. It was one thing for Gu to hide from Linger, but no matter what, he should have come to see her and Long Fei Yi. She and Long Fei Yi had been worried about him for so long. Where is he? Mu Linger's eyes immediately turned red. She didn't cry all the way. She was in such a hurry that she forgot to rest and even forgot to be sad. However, when she couldn't see Qi brother here, all her grievances burst out in an instant. She didn't ask Qi brother to do anything. When he woke up, he could talk to her and smile at her before leaving. Qi brother, do you know how much Linger missed your smile? Linger, don't cry. Don't worry. Let's look for him together. Han Yunxi hurriedly persuaded. Long Fei Yi glanced at Mu Linger and walked out of the door without saying a word. Gu could hide from Mu Linger and not be found by her, so he should be fine. He couldn't be bothered to care about these other people's business. It couldn't be better if Gu didn't come to Yuning. Han Yunxi comforted Mu Ling'er while sending the Shadow Guard to various places to look for him. In fact, she sent the Shadow Guard just to show Mu Ling'er so that Mu Ling'er would have some hope in her heart. She knew that Gu must be deliberately avoiding Ling'er since he didn't even come to her place after leaving Medical City. This silly girl, did she not see it or was she unwilling to accept it? Mu Ling'er was too sad. If she was sad because Chi brother left her last time at the peak of the back mountain, then this time she was sad because Chi brother didn't want her anymore. Han Yunxi couldn't persuade her. In the end, she asked Granny Zhao to carry Ru'er over and said seriously, "Ling'er, if you cry again, you'll scare Ru?" Mu Ling'er looked up. As soon as she saw Ru, she didn't dare to cry out loud, but her tears still flowed. Han Yunxi saw her reluctant look and felt helpless. She could only let her cry. If cry could make her feel better, that would be good. Han Yunxi carried Ru'er into the courtyard. The 1-month-old Ru'er was changing rapidly with each passing day. He could sense the movements of his surroundings and had a wealth of emotions and expressions. He especially liked it when his mother carried him out to stroll in the garden. He was still too young and didn't know that he had a very beautiful godfather who loved to joke and could find a lot of delicious food. He also didn't know how sad Aunt Ling'er was. He also didn't know that the most helpless thing in the world was not being able to get what you wanted. Mu Ling'er cried until she fell into a deep sleep. By the time she woke up, it was already dusk. Han Yunxi was sitting right next to her. As soon as Mu Ling'er opened her eyes, she saw Han Yunxi sitting beside her flipping through the account book. She didn't know what account book it was, but she knew that Han Yunxi was very busy. Her cold heart warmed a lot. She said seriously, "Sister, I've troubled you again." Han Yunxi rolled her eyes at her and looked back at the account book. She said lightly, "I'll stay in this room with you tonight. Are you hungry? Let Granny Zhao cook a bowl of noodles for you." "I'm not hungry." Mu Ling'er thought for a moment and said seriously, "Sister, I'm going to Northernly to find Dr. Gu. I'll go with him to save people." Han Yunxi was surprised and relieved. She patted Mu Ling'er's shoulder and said seriously, "Good job." Because of the snow disaster and the plague, many cities and counties in Northernly were in a state of collapse. The soldiers either fled or were infected with the plague. The entire northern part of Northernly was like hell on earth. The Northern Dynasty's emperors took away the food and medicine and retreated to the foot of the snowy mountains in the north to defend a corner. After Ning Cheng deployed his troops, he brought food and medicine to the disaster victims. The disaster victims and soldiers naturally surrendered. While they were grateful to the Ning Cheng army, they were also very cooperative with the management of Ning Cheng's troops. Ning Jing used 2 months to divide the troops into several groups, and almost all of the plague victims have been isolated. The soldiers were responsible for the delivery of food and medicine. The treatment and prevention of the plague could only be left to the medical team. The first news that Han Yunxi received was that Gu Beiwei was about to arrive at Ning Cheng's camp. He brought 3 very professional plague prevention and treatment teams with him. He wanted to end the disaster as soon as possible before midsummer arrived. Mu Ling'er was proficient in medicine. If she went, she would definitely be a great help to Gu Beiwei. Mu Ling'er wiped away the tears on her face firmly and said seriously, "Sister, go accompany Ru'er and His Highness. I want to see that tree on the mountain. I'll stay the night on the mountain. I'll leave tomorrow morning. Be careful. If you want to go home, come here," Han Yunxi said gently. Mu Ling'er was about to leave, but she suddenly thought of something. She turned around and asked, "Sister, did you receive the letter I sent you before? About the matter with the first Miss Qin?" Han Yunxi asked. "Yes, it's about that." Mu Ling'er still wanted to say that Gu Beiwei might have his reasons, but Han Yunxi interrupted her. "Ling'er, marriage is a private matter. Since North Moon chose her, he must have his reasons. Let's just wait for the wedding banquet." Mu Ling'er frowned. She was still worried. However, Han Yunxi waved her hand and told her to hurry up the mountain before it turned completely dark. The mountain path was easier to traverse. Mu Ling'er left and suddenly laughed at herself. Her own matters were already a mess, so why was she still worrying about Gu Beiwei? When Mu Ling arrived at the top of the mountain, it was already completely dark. It was the end of spring and the beginning of summer. There were more stars in the sky. She leapt onto a large branch of the thorny vines and sat down. Only when she raised her head did she discover that the dense, thorny vines had blocked out the stars. She did not come down again. She sat on the tree in a daze for the entire night. Before she knew it, she had fallen asleep. Perhaps it was because this thorny tree belonged to Chi Brother, but in her daze, she actually had the illusion that Chi Brother was right beside her, watching over her. Chapter 1192. The night gradually deepened. Mu Linger gradually fell asleep in a daze. Even though she was in the wilderness, curling up on a tree branch was not comfortable at all, but she slept exceptionally peacefully. Her instincts did not lie to her. Gu was indeed nearby. By the time Mu Linger fell into a deep sleep, Gu Qixiao had emerged from the darkness. Dressed in an elegant and luxurious red robe, his smile was devastatingly beautiful. His smile was like a red lotus in the night, silently blooming, so enchanting that it was suffocating. He stood on top of the thorny tree, his red robe contrasting with the thorny tree crown. Under the moonlight, it became a meaningful painting. His smile was frozen in the painting. On the tree, Mu Linger's peaceful and innocent sleeping face was also frozen forever. Looking from afar, this scene, this moment was forever. Gu walked closer, quietly jumped onto the tree branch, and sat opposite Mu Linger. Although Mu Linger's eyes were closed, Gu could still see that her eyes were swollen. Actually, even without looking, he knew that this lass must have been crying every day during this period. Wasn't it always like this in the past? When she couldn't find him, she would cry. Gu, who was always smiling and not serious, was rarely so serious. Those long and narrow eyes did not have a smile, only silence and steadiness. He looked at Mu Linger and said lightly, "Silly lass, crying is useless, being strong is useless. It's been so many years, you have to grow up." After saying that, he smiled to himself, 3 parts doting and 7 parts helplessness. He slowly leaned forward, close to Mu Linger, and lightly pecked her forehead, like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, and immediately let go. He could only give this much. He did not even look at her, and jumped down from the thorny tree, and turned to walk into the forest. Step by step, although he walked very slowly, he did not look back. Just like that, Gu's figure disappeared into the night, and Mu Linger slept soundly until dawn. She smiled sweetly in the morning light. He wondered what kind of sweet dream she was having. When the sunlight became more and more dazzling, Mu Linger finally woke up. As soon as she opened her eyes, the first thing she did was to touch her forehead. She had a beautiful dream last night. She dreamed that Chi Brother stayed by her side and even kissed her. That feeling was too real. She remembered clearly that when Chi Brother leaned over, she could smell the unique fragrance of herbs on his body. Those herbs were personally concocted by her. He had been soaking in the medicinal decoction for more than 2 months, so the fragrance was left on his body. In fact, she really wanted to open her eyes and see how Chi Brother would approach her and kiss her, but she didn't dare. She was afraid that as soon as she opened her eyes, she would wake up from her beautiful dream, and all she could see was the endless darkness of the forest. Mu Linger touched her forehead and felt happy for a long time. She tore off her hair tie and tied it into a beautiful bough on the thorny tree above her head. She knew she'd come back here one day. Mu Linger jumped off the tree and stretched her limbs before heading north. At the foot of the mountain, her big sister had arranged for a carriage and luggage for her, as well as a shadow guard. She was going to Northernly to help the medical team save the dying. As soon as Mu Linger left, Chu Shifeng exhaled in relief and immediately went back to report. Yesterday, Han Yunxi had been worried that Mu Linger would take things too hard and do something stupid, so she'd sent Chu Shifeng to observe in secret. Thus, Chu Shifeng had seen Gu last night as well. "Princess," Gu went west. "This subordinate sent people to follow him from a distance, so we can know his whereabouts at any time," Chu Shifeng said. Han Yunxi was surprised. Gu didn't want to see Ling but he didn't want to see her or Long Fei Yi either. That guy had been clamoring all day to be Rueyer's godfather. What kind of godfather would do that? At this moment, Long Fei Yi had just finished dealing with government affairs and arrived. Chu Shifeng immediately told him about Gu, but Long Fei Yi wasn't interested at all. He only grunted before going to play with Ruer. Rueyer had been playing happily with Zhao Mama, but stopped smiling as soon as he saw his father walk over. He stared at his father with wide eyes. His clear black and white eyes were so clear that it was intoxicating. Even someone as smart as Long Fei Yi couldn't guess what the little fellow was thinking. But when Long Fei Yi saw that Ruer didn't seem to reject him, he scooted closer and reached out to hug his son. Helpless, he had just picked up when Ruer started crying again. Long Fei Yi's patience was limited. It had been months since Rueyer was born, but he cried every time he held him. Was this little fellow here to go against him? I don't believe it. Long Fei Yi wouldn't let go of Rueyer. Han Yunxi couldn't bear to let him go and ran over. Let go of him. He's crying like this, you'll scare him. My Long Fei Yi's son shouldn't be so easily frightened. Long Fei Yi said unhappily. How old is he? Let go of him. Han Yunxi was fierce. Actually, Long Fei Yi was only fierce with his words. Seeing his son's teary eyes made his heart ache even more than Han Yunxi. He could only obediently let go. Rueyer stopped crying as soon as he was in his mother's arms. Han Yunxi teased him again, causing him to chuckle even though his eyes were still brimming with tears. His pitiful, adorable appearance made everyone laugh. Even Long Fei Yi couldn't help laughing. Long Fei Yi asked, "Just what's going on? When will he stop being afraid of me?" Han Yunxi gave Long Fei Yi a helpless answer. I don't know either. Why don't you talk things over with him? Long Fei Yi scooted closer to her, who looked him in the eye. Father and son stared at each other for a long time without coming to a conclusion. Chu Shifeng and Zhao Mama were both secretly laughing on the side. In the end, Chu Shifeng walked over and asked in a low voice, "Princess, how about this subordinate find Qi Xiao and have him go help out in Northern Li?" "Meddlesome," Han Yunxi replied. Gu wasn't a man who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitted the fate of mankind. Moreover, Gu was an expert in medicine, not medicine. He wouldn't be of much help in Northern Li, but would only add to the mess. As long as that fellow recovered, Han Yunxi wouldn't care about his whereabouts. Chu Shifeng backed away resentfully at the meddlesome remark, not daring to say another word. But soon enough, the shadow guard reported from the doorway. "Your Highness, there's a secret missive for you." Long Fei Yi was still staring at little Rueyer when he asked, "Where did it come from?" "Gu," the shadow guard replied honestly. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi both looked up at him at the same time. Chu Shifeng was surprised as well and quickly went to retrieve the missive. Long Fei Yi's gaze turned cold as soon as he opened the letter. There was only one line written inside. "Long Fei Yi, tell your shadow to get lost. Don't follow this old man anymore, or else you'll have to bear the consequences." Long Fei Yi's eyes were cold as he handed the missive to Chu Shifeng. Chu Shifeng sensed something off as soon as he saw his master's expression. He carefully peeked at the words and felt like his world had collapsed. Long Fei Yi didn't even ask where Gu was. "Cold," he asked, "who sent someone to follow him?" Chu Shifeng's head was almost buried in his collar as he didn't dare to answer. Han Yunxi was about to speak when Long Fei Yi said cold, "Chu Shifeng, you go follow him personally. Follow him wherever he goes. Bring more poison guards with you as well. Remember, if you lose him, you'll have to bear the consequences." Chu Shifeng raised his head and grinned, revealing his pearly whites. Yes, this subordinate obeys. His Highness is still partial to his own people. He'd definitely bring the best poison guards with him to follow Gu every day. That way, he'd see if Gu dared to tell them to get lost again. A leopard couldn't change its spots. Gu was still as bad-tempered as ever after his narrow escape from death. What could Han Yunxi say? She pretended she didn't know a thing and kept playing with her precious son. Looking at Rua, who didn't know how to sit yet and only knew how to cry and laugh. At most, he could wave his little hands and kick his little legs. Han Yunqi was truly anxious to see Rui grow up faster. That way, she could take her son and run all over the world. In truth, Han Yunqi was busy as hell. Even if Rui could run around with her, she probably wouldn't have time to leave Yunning Prefecture at all. A few days ago, Ning Jing had mentioned in her letters that little Tang Tang had learned how to walk. Han Yunqi calculated that it'd be next year before Rui could walk again. After Ning Jing and Tang Li returned to the Tang clan, everything went smoothly. Lady Tang and the Tang clan elders were all preoccupied with Tang Li and didn't have time to worry about Ning Jing. Most importantly, they still didn't know that Ning Jing couldn't conceive anymore. Han Yunqi might have spies of the Tang clan, but outsiders couldn't meddle in its internal affairs. If she wanted Ning Jing to have a good life in the future, she could only place her hopes on Tang Li. 10 days later, Mu Ling arrived at the headquarters of the Northern Li Ning clan troops, the Hulun Mountain Barracks. Han Yunqi had already greeted Ning Cheng and Gu Beiwei. They weren't surprised by Mu Ling's arrival, but Jin Zi, who didn't know anything, was surprised. Mu Ling came just in time to see Gu Beiwei going to the quarantine area. If she had been half a day late, she probably wouldn't have been able to see Gu Beiwei. Mu Ling was very conflicted about other things, but she wasn't at all conflicted about saving people and treating illnesses. She was decisive and prudent when needed. As soon as she arrived at the barracks, she said to Gu Beiwei, "Dr. Gu, I'll go with you." Mu Ling wasn't a doctor and might not be as good as Gu Beiwei in diagnosis and medication, but as a pharmacist, she was of great help to Gu Beiwei. For example, she was responsible for checking whether the prescription was right for the illness, whether the combination of medicinal ingredients was reasonable, whether there were any side effects, whether the dosage was appropriate, and whether the ingredients were real or fake. Gu Beiwei wasn't as professional as Mu Ling when it came to the quality of medicinal ingredients, so it wasn't convenient for him to be so serious. Mu Ling, who was from Medicine City, was the most suitable person for this task. After all, almost all of the medicinal ingredients for the disaster relief this time were provided by Medicine City for free. Gu Beiwei had to be wary of the various clans from Medicine City tampering with the ingredients. Chapter 1193. How could they tamper with the herbs? For example, old and moldy herbs could be dried in the sun, washed, and sent over for use. Another example was that some herbs had already been refined and their essence could be dried in the sun before being sent over. This kind of thing was not uncommon in the pharmaceutical world. Some moldy herbs could still be used after being dried in the sun, but some herbs would be poisonous once they became moldy. As for those second-hand herbs, their efficacy was not as good as the original. If they were used according to the normal dosage, it would directly affect their efficacy. Gu Beiwei was worried that there was no suitable person to take care of this. Mu Ling was a straightforward girl who dared to offend anyone. She was simply the best candidate. Gu Beiwei saw that Mu Ling was covered in dust and looked tired. He said, "Miss Ling please rest well. I will go ahead first. You can leave tomorrow morning." "I'm not tired. Dr. Gu, how many people have died in the quarantine area if we delay for a day?" Mu Ling had a serious look on her face. Currently, the disaster areas in Northern Li were basically under control. Every city was divided into two. The healthy victims and the infected victims were separated. Several medical teams were sent to different quarantine areas to save the critically ill. Ning Cheng's soldiers were responsible for delivering herbs to the healthy victims to prevent infection. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. However, there were still many critically ill patients who died every day. Their bodies were all burned nearby. The reason why Gu Beiwei wanted to personally stay in the quarantine area was to protect these critically ill patients. Currently, there were 7 cities that surrendered to Ning Cheng, occupying more than half of the northern part of Northern Li. In these 7 cities, there were about 300 critically ill patients. Gu Beiwei could not handle it alone. He could only do his best and save as many as possible. Gu Beiwei admired Mu Ling's professionalism the most. He nodded and said, "I'll give you 2 hours to eat and rest." It was at this time that Jin Zi came in and bumped into Mu Ling. Jin Zi stared blankly. Mu Ling also stared blankly. The two of them, one at the door, the other at the door, the distance between them was only about 10 steps. They looked at each other. Gu Beiwa left without a sound, and Ning Chung followed suit. Unexpectedly, Jin Zi turned around and looked at him. Cold, he said, "Ning Chung, I have something to talk to you about." "Oh," Ning Chung said thoughtfully. "Go ahead. Can I have a word with you?" Jin Zi's tone was obviously unfriendly. Although he was talking to Ning Chung, his eyes never left Mu Ling. Mu Ling really didn't like Jin Zi's gaze. Every time he looked at her, his gaze was cold and sharp, as if he could see through her heart. Mu Ling was a muddle-headed person who couldn't even see herself clearly. She hated Jin Zi's gaze and was also afraid of it. "Then let's go," Ning Chung said again. Jin Zi then retracted his gaze and turned around to leave. After everyone had left, the curtains were lowered. Mu Ling then regained her senses. Actually, the reason she came back to Northernly this time was firstly for disaster relief, and secondly to settle the score with Jin Zi. In another 2 days, their 1-year agreement would be up. Mu Ling shook her head, not wanting to think too much. On the way here, she had already made up her mind. When Jin Zi came to ask her, she would lay her cards on the table with Jin Zi. Mu Ling exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, walked to the warm couch at the side, and sat down heavily on it. Suddenly, squeak! This sharp squeak startled Mu Ling so much that she immediately jumped up. She saw Lil Thing sprawled out on all fours, lying flat on the rabbit fur cushion. Mu Ling didn't even look carefully earlier. How would she know that Lil Thing would be sleeping here? She hurriedly carried Lil Thing up and pulled at its claws, then pulled at its hind legs. Lil Thing didn't do it on purpose. "I didn't know you were here." Lil Thing lazily stretched its 4 claws and twisted its neck before looking at Mu Ling. "I really didn't do it on purpose." Mu Ling apologized again. Lil Thing immediately stood up and turned around to show Mu Ling that it was fine. Mu Ling couldn't help but laugh. "You're still the best." Mu Ling sat down to rest, and Lil Thing jumped onto her. It hadn't seen Miss Ling for a long time, and it was very happy. Although Mu Ling was tired, she couldn't fall asleep. She wanted to go out for a walk and talk about the disaster areas, but when she thought of Jin Zi and Ning Chung talking outside, she didn't want to disturb them. She held Lil Thing in her hands and began to chat with it. "Lil Thing, did you know that Dr. Gu's getting married? That's not right. You follow Dr. Gu around every day, so you must know." "Lil Thing, have you seen that eldest Miss Chin?" "I haven't, but I've heard that she can only sit in a wheelchair for the rest of her life." "Lil Thing, you know Dr. Gu best. What do you think Dr. Gu is thinking?" Mu Ling said a bunch of things, but Lil Thing only looked confused. It had no idea what she was talking about. As for that eldest Miss Chin, Lil Thing had no idea either. Originally, its mission was complete after the gentleman brought Gu back to Medical City. It was supposed to return to Mama Yunshi's side and visit its little master. But it couldn't bear to part with the gentleman. Mama Yunshi didn't send anyone to pick it up, so it happily followed the gentleman to Northernly. Mu Ling was staring blankly at Lil Thing, while Jin Zi and Ning Chung were already in another tent. "Why didn't you tell me she was coming?" Jin Zi's face was filled with rage. Ning Chung might be blind in one eye, but his other eye was still sharp enough to see the source of Jin Zi's anger. "What? You can't bear to see her go to the quarantine zone?" he asked. "I'm asking you, why didn't you tell me she was coming?" Jin Zi asked word by word. "Why should I tell you she was coming?" Ning Chung smiled coldly. "You," Jin Zi fumed. "Why are you so worked up? If you can't bear to see her go, then just kidnap her." "My eyes aren't good, so I'll pretend I didn't see anything," Ning Chung teased. Han Yunchi had long written him a letter telling him to keep an eye on Jin Zi and not let him bully Mu Ling. Ning Chung didn't take the matter to heart. Ning Chung knew better than anyone what kind of person Jin Zi was. No matter how much Jin Zi liked to eat forced melons, he wouldn't really eat them. Jin Zi didn't speak, but stretched out his hand. Unexpectedly, Ning Chung simply took out Jin Zi's indenture agreement from his sleeve and placed it in his hand. Jin Zi was alarmed and unconsciously clutched the indenture agreement, afraid that Ning Cheng would take it away again. There won't be any more battles in Northern Li. Yesterday, we received news from the snowy mountains that the commoners in Snow Country have rebelled. Ning Cheng wasn't joking. With a serious face, he said, "We agreed that if you help me take over Northern Li, this indenture agreement will be yours." Jinzi didn't feel grateful. This indenture agreement was a matter of course for him. He carefully looked at the indenture agreement. It was indeed genuine. He immediately tore the indenture agreement and threw it into the furnace. Looking at the raging fire in the furnace for a long time, he muttered to himself, "I'm free. Hee, you can kidnap her now, before I change my mind." Ning Cheng laughed and walked out. Ning Cheng didn't do this to test Jinzi, because Jinzi didn't need to be tested. Without a doubt, he was doing this to convince Han Yunxi not to worry. Compared to Gu, Ning Cheng was biased toward Jinzi. Moreover, he also had some selfish motives. He couldn't keep Jinzi to take over the Black Clan. Perhaps Mu Ling'er could do it. Mu Ling'er only had about 2 hours. However, Jinzi didn't go to find her. Ning Cheng found that he had handed over all the matters in his hands to the deputy general. Before Mu Ling'er left, he disappeared. Mu Ling'er finished her meal and finally walked out of the tent. Seeing that Jinzi wasn't outside, she secretly sighed in relief. She directly went to find Gu Beiwei. In this way, after Mu Ling'er arrived at the camp, she didn't stay for the night. She went straight to the nearest isolated area with Gu Beiwei. At night, Ning Cheng sat alone on the grass outside the camp to drink. The attendants felt strange when they didn't see Jinzi. They knew that Master Ning would usually find Jinzi to accompany him when he drank. After all, it was lonely to drink alone. However, they didn't make any guesses. They just thought that Jinzi had something to do outside. Who knew that after 3 days, Jinzi still didn't appear? Ning Cheng's newly promoted Deputy General Chen couldn't sit still anymore. He ran to Ning Cheng's tent to ask about this matter. "Master Ning, Jinzi wouldn't have run away, right?" Ning Cheng asked. "So what if he ran away? If Jinzi runs away, who can control the Black Clan?" Deputy General Chen was anxious. The Black Clan was very valiant and reckless. They only feared Jinzi. "The indenture agreement is with me. Are you still afraid that he will run away?" Ning Cheng asked again. "Master, what can a thin indenture contract do to him? He's not someone who's afraid of lawsuits." Deputy General Chen said seriously. The indenture agreement was useful for ordinary people. However, for people like Jinzi, it was really useless. Even if he didn't want the indenture agreement and directly ran away, Ning Cheng might not be able to find him. Ning Cheng looked up and asked seriously, "Since it's useless, why didn't he run away after so many years?" When these words came out, Deputy General Chen was speechless. That indenture agreement was Jinzi's character, Jinzi's integrity, and the backbone that Jinzi had kept in his heart for so many years. "This subordinate has misspoken." Deputy General Chen saluted and consciously retreated. At this moment, Mu Ling'er had just finished checking a few batches of medicinal herbs and returned to her tent. She and Gu Beiwei were very busy when they arrived at the isolated area. Although it was already late at night, she only had about an incense's time to rest. Gu Beiwei would later send someone to send the prescription for her to check. During this rest time, she should have taken a short nap. However, her mind was full of Jinzi. Yesterday was the deadline for the appointment. Jinzi actually didn't come to look for her? This wasn't like him at all. Could it be that he had already given up? Not long after, Gu Beiwei's medical assistant sent over a pile of prescriptions. It was much more than what Mu Ling'er had expected. "Miss Ling'er, these are all prescriptions to prevent the plague. Dr. Gu said that Tianqi, Buddha's hand, and pangolin are currently in short supply. It is estimated that there will not be enough for the next month." Before the medical assistant finished speaking, Mu Ling'er understood what Gu Beiwei wanted. "All right, I will try my best to find alternative medicine. I will also consider the dosage. Please pass on my message to Dr. Gu and ask him not to worry." That night, Mu Ling'er didn't sleep. She spent the whole night pondering over 1/3 of the prescriptions. It should be known that the prescriptions that Gu Beiwei sent over were not simple. Mu Ling worked with Gu Beiwei in this way. Unknowingly, a month had passed. Jin Zi didn't come to look for her, nor did he appear in the military camp again. Where did Jin Zi go? Chapter 1194. Where did Jin Zi go? If Ning Cheng hadn't said that Jin Zi had gone to Winter Crow country, the army would have been filled with rumors and the Black Clan would have made a ruckus. Because in the next 2 months, Jin Zi didn't appear again. And in the 3 months that Jin Zi was missing, the medical team under Gu Beiyue's personal leadership completely controlled the epidemic in Northern Li. The epidemic didn't spread to the south, and almost all the cities in the north returned to normal. There were only a dozen or so patients left, and they were all arranged to a desolate place. Gu Beiyue and Mu Ling as well as a few doctors, personally guarded them. The medical team split up to carry out the final cleanup of the epidemic area and distribute the medicine to prevent and cure it. Ning Cheng, on the other hand, led the soldiers to deliver grain and rebuild the city. Spring and summer were the time for grass to grow. Northern Li had experienced such a great disaster in spring. Not only had their livestock suffered a great blow, but their population had also plummeted. It would take 2 or 3 years for them to recover. The herdsmen were valiant and straightforward. They would repay kindness with kindness. The herdsmen hailed the Ning family army as the saviors of the grasslands and were very respectful to the soldiers. They also called Ning Cheng the savior of the grasslands. Just as the epidemic was about to end, news came from Snow Country. The Northern Dynasty's emperors had been forced by the people of Snow Country and had no choice but to commit suicide on the snowy mountains. With the death of the Northern Dynasty's emperors, his loyal subordinates scattered and fled. Ning Cheng always knew that there would be no war at the foot of the snowy mountains, but he didn't expect it to happen so quickly. He didn't personally go to Snow Country and sent his deputy to clean up the mess. Just like that, Northern Li, once the strongest army in Cloud Realm, was destroyed. In fact, if they really fought, not to mention the Ning family army, even the East Qin army wouldn't be able to destroy Northern Li in a short period of time. Northern Li was destroyed partly because of the civil strife caused by Jun Yixie and partly because of the epidemic. Half a month later, Gu Beiyue saved the lives of 7 patients and personally set fire to the bodies of the other 9. Officially, Northern Li's plague had ended. Ning Cheng prepared a grand bonfire banquet to reward the soldiers, including the medical team. But who knew that Gu Beiyue actually asked the doctors and the medical team to leave in a low-key manner? He did not plan to stay any longer. The night before the banquet, he sent Mu Linger away and came alone to say goodbye to Ning Cheng. When Gu Beiyue entered the tent, he thought that Ning Cheng would be drinking. Instead, he saw Ning Cheng standing next to a map of Northern Li hanging on the wall, deep in thought. Gu Beiyue stood there for a moment before saying, "Great General Ning," to say goodbye. Ning Cheng asked, his attention still on the map. Gu Beiyue had arranged for the medical team to leave before telling him afterwards that there was nothing he could do. He knew Gu Beiyue's personality very well. Tonight, he had been waiting for Gu Beiyue to say goodbye. Gu Beiyue didn't reply. He walked closer and saw that there were quite a few markings on the map. They were scattered around the northern border of Northern Li, the snowy mountains, and a few large cities. Is the Ning clan head planning to station troops in the various regions right now? Gu Beiyue asked in a low voice. Ning Cheng glanced at the map and suddenly laughed. What? Won't Long Fei agree? Long Fei had spent the past few months at Yuning Palace and had almost finished all of Cloud Realm Continent's military deployments. Western Zhou, Tianing, Tian, and the central regions and the southern regions all had garrisons stationed there. Only Northern Li's situation had just stabilized. Whether it was Western Zhou, Tianing, Tian, or the central and southern regions, none of them were as centralized as Northern Li's. Every major region had 2 or 3 separate armies under different military branches. Meanwhile, Northern Li only had the Ning clan troops, which meant that the Ning clan had monopolized all of Northern Li. That was a huge taboo. Even if Long Fei Yi didn't say anything, his strategists and soldiers would all have opinions. If Ning Cheng was smart enough, he would have gone to Yining Palace this morning and let Long Fei Yi make his own arrangements for Northern Li's garrisons. Ning Cheng's reply to Gu Beiyue meant that he was well aware of the stakes involved. Ning Clan head, it's up to His Highness whether he agrees or not. What you do is your own business, Gu Beiyue said. Unexpectedly, Ning Cheng replied. This one remembers that the princess is in charge of Northern Li's military affairs. This matter should be the princess's business, right? The princess is familiar with Northern Li, right? This one only wants to gift this map to the princess. Gu Beiyue's expression was as gentle and calm as ever. Ning Clan head, the princess is familiar with Northern Li, right? But His Highness must have as many maps of Northern Li as you do. Ning Cheng gave a start, then quickly understood something. He laughed heartily and didn't dwell on the matter. Instead, he invited Gu Beiyue to the side. Someone come, bring up the food and wine this general has prepared, Ning Cheng shouted. Only then did Gu Beiyue realize that Ning Cheng had long prepared a farewell feast for him. When the food and wine were brought up, Gu Beiyue glanced at them and found that there were only 2 dishes. There wasn't even any meat, but the wine was excellent. Gu Beiyue, is there a lot of food in the military? Please make do with it, Ning Cheng said jokingly. Gu Beiyue only replied with 2 words, it's enough. It was already the end of summer. Northern Li wouldn't have a good harvest for the entire autumn, and the ensuing winter would be grim. When the time came, they would need a lot of food from the central and southern regions. Now, they had 2 dishes to go with the wine. It was really good. Last time, Ning Cheng saw that Gu Beiyue was in a hurry and didn't have time to sit down and have a good chat. This time, he finally had a chance to say a few heartfelt words to her. They tacitly didn't mention anything about the military. They talked about the D clan and the Nether clan, their childhood, and each other's families. Lil Thing occasionally poked its little head out of Gu Beiyue's wide sleeve and looked curiously at the wine on the table. It wanted a drink, but didn't dare to ask for it. It was in a dilemma for most of the day. It was obviously sneaking around. It didn't know why, but the young master was able to read its thoughts while chatting with Ning Cheng. When the princess poured a cup of wine and placed it on the table, Lil Thing didn't hesitate to rush over and lick the cup impatiently. It was just 1 sip, but it was extremely excited. It didn't expect the wine to be so delicious, so it licked it with all its might. Soon, it licked it clean, leaving not a drop behind. At this time, it turned to look at the young master. It was a little unsteady on its feet. It felt its head sway, and the young master in front of it had become 2 identical people. Squeak! Lil Thing wanted to express something, but unfortunately, it only squeaked once before its body fell to the side. It got drunk just like that. Ning Cheng was shocked. Gu Beiyue was also rather surprised. According to Lil Thing's appetite and its immunity to poison, it shouldn't be so weak to wine. Ning Cheng's wine was excellent, but it wasn't wine that was easy to get drunk on. Even someone who didn't know how to drink wine wouldn't collapse after 5 or 6 cups, right? How's Gu Beiyue's tolerance as a master? If you get drunk, I can keep you for a few more days. Ning Cheng joked. Lil Thing is the princess's. Gu Beiyue hurriedly explained. Ning Cheng didn't care about this question. He was curious about Gu Beiyue's tolerance. He picked up a large jar of wine and placed it on the table. He smiled and said, Do you want to accompany me? Too much wine is bad for the body. Gu Beiyue said lightly. When the heart is happy, nothing can hurt the body, Ning Cheng retorted. Gu Beiyue pondered for a moment and smiled. That makes sense. In the end, he still very humbly rejected Ning Cheng's large jar of wine and didn't accompany him to the end. This one's tolerance is average. With Master Ning's tolerance, if you want to be happy, I'm afraid you can only invite His Highness to accompany you. A complicated look flashed past Ning Cheng's eyes. He picked up the jar of wine and drank it in big gulps. He drank it all in one breath and casually threw the jar to the side. He smiled and said, I will. In a few days, I will go to Yining to invite him for a drink after I've explained everything in the army. Drink to your heart's content. Gu Beiyue was puzzled. With the relationship between Ning Cheng and Long Fei Yi, Ningqing wouldn't really invite Long Fei Yi to drink, and Long Fei Yi wouldn't be interested. But judging from Ning Cheng's tone, it didn't seem to be a joke. That night, Ning Cheng and Gu Beiwei chatted until late at night, while Mu Ling sat alone on the grass outside the camp until late at night. In the grassland in June, no matter where you were, as long as you raised your head, you could see the sky full of stars. Mu Ling was lying on the grass at this time, looking up at the starry sky. The starry sky was so bright, but behind it was a bottomless, dark sky. But if it wasn't for the darkness behind, how could she see the bright stars? Mu Ling stared blankly and muttered to herself, "Is it because it's so dark that I can see the stars?" Mu Ling knew that the medical team had left and that Gu Beiwei was leaving tomorrow. What about her? It had been 3 months. She had been overdue for 3 months, but Jinzi hadn't appeared. Didn't he know that there was a phrase called "no waiting for overdue"? If he didn't come, did it mean that their agreement was over? She couldn't be responsible for her promise anymore. Mu Ling suddenly sat up and said seriously, "Yes, no waiting for overdue." She thought it through and strode towards Ning Cheng's tent. She didn't know that Jinzi had been nearby, watching her. For the past 3 months, Jinzi hadn't gone anywhere and had been following her all this time. As soon as Mu Ling arrived at Ning Cheng's tent, Gu Beiwei and Ning Cheng walked out before a soldier could announce her arrival. "Miss Linger, it's so late. Is something the matter?" Ning Cheng asked. "You two chat. I'll be going back first." Gu Beiwei left first. With Gu Beiwei's martial arts, he had long sensed that Jinzi had been following them. He hadn't said anything even now because he wanted to stick his nose into this matter. Unexpectedly, Mu Ling suddenly asked, "Dr. Beiwei, are you going back to Medical City to get married?" In the past few months, Mu Ling had interacted with all the doctors in the medical team, so she heard quite a bit of gossip about Gu Beiwei's marriage. Many people said that after Gu Beiwei returned from Northern Li, he would go to the Qin family to propose marriage and prepare for the wedding. Gu Beiwei was slightly taken aback. He turned back and gave Mu Ling a deep look. He originally wanted to brush it off with a smile, but when he saw Mu Ling's melancholic face for the past 3 months, he couldn't help but say, "Girl, go about your own business." She didn't even care about her own business, yet she was always concerned about his marriage. This girl deserved to be melancholic. Chapter 1195. Mu Linger never thought that Gu Beiwei would call her girl. She couldn't get used to it for a while. She only felt that the way Gu Beiwei spoke and smiled just now was not the same as usual. Inexplicably, Mu Linger suddenly felt that Gu Beiwei had become much more amiable. One had to know that although he was humble and cultured, he always gave people a sense of distance. If her brother-in-law had an aura that kept people 1,000 miles away and didn't dare to approach him for the first time, then Gu Beiwei had a very good impression of him for the first time. After getting along with him for a long time, she gradually felt his alienation. They had known each other for a long time and were very familiar with each other, but when she thought about it carefully, she realized that she didn't understand him at all. Mu Linger couldn't help but be curious. Was Gu Beiwei really close to Miss Qin? After thinking about it carefully, she quickly felt that her idea was laughable. He was going to marry her, so of course he liked her. Since he liked her, he would naturally be close to her. If it weren't for Mu Linger's big mouth, Ning Cheng wouldn't have known about Gu Beiwei's marriage. He asked Gu Beiwei in surprise, "You're getting married?" "Yes, soon. When the time comes, I will definitely honor you with my presence at Medical City to drink a cup of wine." After Gu Beiwei finished speaking, he smiled and turned to leave. He clearly didn't want to say anything more. He and Mu Linger both stared blankly at Gu Beiwei. They both had the same thought. Gu Beiwei, this guy was really hard to understand. "Miss Linger, did you need something from me?" Ning Cheng asked. Mu Linger looked around, so Ning Cheng led her into the tent to talk. However, when they entered the tent, Mu Linger was still hesitating, as if she had some misgivings. "Why don't you come back after you've made up your mind?" Ning Cheng asked. No, I just want to ask you, just ask." Mu Ling was in a dilemma. She hesitated for a long time before she said, "Where's Jinzi?" Ning Cheng was not surprised. What surprised him was not Mu Ling asking about the gold, but Mu Ling-er's attitude towards this matter. This little girl had always been carefree and said whatever she wanted to say. She had chased Gu all over the world without hiding anything from anyone, and she had never felt embarrassed. Everyone asked her if she liked Gu, and she admitted it openly. She asked about Jin Zi's whereabouts after being rescued, yet she was able to stammer for so long. Was she embarrassed or guilty? Ning Chung sized up Mu Ling-er and asked, "Why are you looking for gold?" Mu Ling-er's heart was already in a mess, so she did not feel embarrassed or guilty. However, when Ning Chung looked at her like this and asked her this question, she actually felt a little embarrassed. "I'm looking for him for something," she answered. "What is it? Is it very important?" Ning Chung asked again. Mu Ling-er hesitated for a moment, then suddenly said, "It's nothing important. Sorry to disturb you so late at night. I'm leaving." Ning Cheng's eyes flashed, and he said loudly, "I've already given the indenture agreement to Jin Zi." He left after receiving the indenture agreement and hasn't appeared since. He probably returned to Winter Crow country and will never appear again. Mu Ling-er stopped abruptly. "He's free? That indenture agreement was burned right here in my tent 3 months ago." Ning Cheng's voice was as loud as ever, as if he was doing it on purpose. He went back by himself. Mu Ling-er muttered to herself. Suddenly, her eyes brightened, and she turned back to look at Ning Chung, laughing loudly. "That's great. Then I'm free too." She was free too? Just as Ning Chung was pondering the meaning of these words, Mu Ling-er had already skipped out. When she reached the door, she turned back and shouted to Ning Chung, "Great General Ning, I'm leaving in a bit. I'm going back to find my sister." Leaving in a bit? Leaving in the middle of the night? Was she in such a hurry? Ning Cheng's mouth twitched. As he expected, Jin Zi appeared at his door as soon as Mu Ling-er's figure disappeared. Jin Zi pushed Ning Chung into the tent and said angrily, "Ning Chung, who told you I went to Winter Crow country? Who told you I'm never coming back?" Ning Chung had deliberately said those words to provoke Jin Zi into revealing himself through Mu Ling-er. At first, he also thought Jin Zi had returned to Winter Crow country. However, Jin Zi hadn't sent him a single letter during this period, so he knew Jin Zi hadn't left. "It's a misunderstanding. Can you go and explain? She's leaving in a bit," Ning Chung said. "My business with her has nothing to do with you." Jin Zi was full of anger. Ning Chung probably couldn't be so relaxed in front of Gu Beiwei. Only in front of Jin Zi could he say everything he wanted to. He restrained his smile and said seriously, "Jin Zi, I have something important to discuss with you. The matter in Northern Li is basically settled. Are you coming with me to Yunning County? I'll leave in a few days." Ning Chung was afraid Jin Zi would refuse and wanted to ask him to consider for a few days before making a decision. Unexpectedly, Jin Zi nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I'll leave tonight. Do whatever you want." Jin Zi looked like he was in a hurry to leave, just like Mu Ling-er just now. Ning Chung pressed his shoulder. "Just now Mu Ling-er said she's also free. What does that mean?" When Han Yunqi left Northern Li last year, she had asked him to investigate what had happened between Jin Zi and Mu Ling-er. He hadn't been able to get anything out of her. However, Mu Ling-er had clearly let it slip just now. Jin Zi had returned to Winter Crow country and was never coming back. She was free? Could it be that Jin Zi had forced Mu Ling-er to do something? I don't know. Let go. Jin Zi said coldly. "If I tell Han Yunqi what you said just now, do you think you can still go to Yunning?" Ning Cheng's voice also turned cold. Jin Zi was silent for a while before saying lightly, "Ning Chung, I've always treated you as a friend. Don't interfere in the matters between me and Mu Ling-er, okay?" Ning Chung was a little angry. "Lung Sheng, if I didn't treat you as a friend, would I have given you the indenture agreement? Do you know that Han Yunqi told me again and again to keep an eye on you? Of all the people you could have provoked, you just had to provoke her sister." It was only in private that Ning Chung would call Han Yunqi directly. Only then did Jin Zi turn back to look at Ning Chung. He caught a glimpse of wine at the side and strode over, picking it up and downing it. Jin Zi's alcohol tolerance wasn't very good to begin with. These days, he had been following Ning Cheng and was dragged by Ning Cheng to drink every day. His alcohol tolerance had improved, but he still didn't get drunk after downing a large jar. After finishing the wine, Jinzi sat down at the side. Ning Cheng crossed his arms and leaned against the map on the wall, looking at him. Jinzi was a taciturn person. At this moment, the figure sitting there alone gave off a silent and lonely feeling. He told him about the agreement between him and Mu Linger. Ning Cheng thought for a while and said seriously, "Do you know that I won't wait for you after the deadline? I only promised her that if Gu takes a liking to her within a year, I'll let her go. A year's time is up. It's my business when I want to bring her back to Winter Crow." Jinzi said confidently. Ning Cheng asked curiously, "Gu didn't come along, other than Han Yunxi and a few others. No one knew about Gu's situation." Ning Cheng and Jinzi had no way of finding out. However, Gu didn't come along with Mu Linger this time. Moreover, Han Yunxi had told them that Gu definitely wasn't with Mu Linger. According to the previous agreement, Jinzi could naturally bring her away. Moreover, Mu Linger even took the initiative to come to the military camp and asked about his whereabouts. She must be here to break the contract. Otherwise, based on her character, she would have hidden far away and wouldn't come here. Jinzi's lips curled into a self-mocking smile as he said lightly, "Ning Cheng, we're both businessmen and we value contracts the most. But he's actually afraid that I'll allow her to break the contract. For the past 3 months, he had been avoiding her because he was afraid that she would come to negotiate with him. He was afraid that his heart would soften under her pitiful gaze once again. How could he give up on the prey that was already in his mouth?" Ning Cheng smiled helplessly and patted Jinzi's shoulder, saying, "It's done. I'll pretend that I don't know about this. If you're going to Yunnan County, hurry and prepare." Jinzi was about to leave when Mu Linger unexpectedly returned. She didn't enter the tent, but said outside, "Great General Ning, can I ask you for a favor?" Ning Cheng glanced at Jinzi and answered, "What is it?" "I have a gold card here. If you see Jinzi in the future, please pass it to him on my behalf. Just say that I'm returning it to him." Outside the door, Mu Linger was already leading the carriage and carrying her luggage. "All right, you can leave it to the guards," Ningda said loudly. "Thank you for your trouble. I'll be leaving then." Mu Linger's tone was cheerful. Jinzi lowered his head and looked to the side, his expression cold and dissatisfied. After Mu Linger left, Jinzi and Ning Cheng walked out. Jinzi took the gold card and played with it, saying to Ning Cheng, "See you in Yunning. Also, as we agreed before, you have to compensate me for my private bank. Otherwise, even if I stay in Northern Li, I won't get involved with the Black Clan's matters." Jinzi wasn't polite at all. Ning Cheng was also straightforward. "No problem. Leave your tiger token. These few months, the Black Clan's army and the Tiger Army have been a mess." Jinzi didn't think much and took out the tiger token and threw it to Ning Cheng. He left in a hurry, secretly chasing after Mu Ling. Only after Jinzi left did Ning Cheng's lips curl into a sly smile. "Brother, I can only keep you if I have both the woman and the money. If you want money, go ask Long Fei Yi." Ning Cheng returned to the tent and took out a brush and ink. He walked to the map and quickly began to draw circles and dots on it. The markings that Gu Beiwei saw just now were all the previous ones. He hadn't written down the places he wanted to mark. He spent the whole night to set up a trap where the Black Clan and the Tiger Army dominated Northern Li. He didn't want to give this map to the princess, but to set up a trap for the princess. No matter what, Northern Li must be the princess's power. The next day, in the name of Jinzi, he mobilized the Black Clan's army and the Tiger Army and stationed them at the Three Roads Pass and several major checkpoints in Northern Li. A few days later, Ning Cheng handed over all his affairs to the deputy general and left the camp alone, rushing to Yunnan County. 3 days later, the deputy general received a handwritten letter from Ning Cheng. There's only one sentence in the letter: "Everything is fine, don't disturb me, don't look for me." The deputy general was shocked and began to look for Ning Cheng. Unfortunately, he couldn't get in touch or find him. Ning Cheng was missing on the way to Yunning. The deputy general found Jinzi and asked him to look for him. He also told Ning Jing and Ning Nuo to look for him. Unfortunately, no one could find Ning Cheng. All the military forces were ready to wait for Ning Cheng to come to Yuning and compete with him for the power of Northern Li. However, Ning Cheng abandoned Northern Li and left. As for Long Fei Yi, who had prepared strong liquor, he was undoubtedly stood up. Chapter 1196. Ning Cheng's disappearance had caused a huge uproar in Cloud Realm continent. Leaving aside the others, even Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were surprised. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were still discussing Ning Cheng's deployment of troops in Northern Li when they received the news. Ning Cheng had actually taken matters into his own hands and stationed the Black Clan and Tiger troops in various strongholds in Northern Li, including the most crucial three-way pass. Ning Cheng made all these arrangements before running off on his own? What did he mean by that? The land of Northern Li was not something that could be conquered by an ordinary army. The Black Clan and Tiger troops were local bullies, while the Ning Clan troops had been hailed as the saviors of the grasslands and heroes in the hearts of the nomads. Under these circumstances, Long Fei Yi had no choice but to hand Northern Li over to the Ning Clan troops. Long Fei Yi had long given Northern Li to the Ning Clan troops, or else he wouldn't have let Han Yunxi take charge of Northern Li's military affairs in the first place. Personal grudges were personal grudges, while military affairs were military affairs. Long Fei Yi hadn't mixed them up then, much less now. The Ning Clan troops had to stay in Northern Li and rely on the nomads' trust to replace the Black Clan troops in the future. As for whether Ning Cheng would stay or leave, that was Ning Cheng's own business. If Ning Cheng could win the drinking contest, the title of King of Northern Li would belong to him. If he lost, Ning Cheng would have to promote someone to take charge of the D Clan and the Ning Clan troops. Long Fei Yi's spearhead was Ning Cheng himself, not the D Clan, nor the Ning Clan troops who had risked their lives to save lives. If Ning Cheng left, then so be it. Even if he didn't promote anyone to take charge of the Ning Clan troops, he should have at least stationed them in various strongholds. But Ning Cheng had done the exact opposite. Not only had he stood him up, but he'd also ruthlessly tricked him. Given Northern Li's current situation, Jin Zi, whose origins were still unknown, had become the key to Northern Li. Han Yunxi pinched her brows. She really couldn't figure out what Ning Cheng wanted to do. She said seriously to Long Fei Yi, "Goldie has always wanted to leave. He has no interest in the Black Clan army. Once he leaves, he will definitely take the Tiger army with him. As for the Black Clan army, that's a bunch of ambitious wolves." Long Fei Yi said, "How good could the army raised by Jun Xie be? If it wasn't for Jin Zi's fake identity as the orphan of the Black Clan, he wouldn't have cared about that army at all. Long Fei Yi wouldn't be so stupid as to leave the Black Race army behind. The Black Race army would definitely be disbanded. However, now wasn't the wrong time. It was almost autumn, and after the Mid-Autumn Festival, the northern part of Northern Li would start to get cold. Food, tents, blankets, charcoal, and other supplies would have to be supplied from the south. Reinforcements were ultimately limited. To put it bluntly, this winter, Northern Li's herdsmen, especially the herdsmen in the north, would have to tighten their belts. At this time, as long as there was even the slightest bit of conflict, it could easily become a fuse and cause a riot. In other words, this was the perfect time for people with bad intentions to fan the flames. Not only could Long Fei Yi not touch the Black Race army, but he also had to use Jin Zi to firmly suppress them. Once Ning Cheng left, Jin Zi definitely couldn't leave. Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with a trace of complexity. She didn't quite believe that Ning Cheng would deliberately create this kind of problem for her and Long Fei Yi. It was fine if Ning Cheng deliberately made things difficult for Long Fei Yi, but why would he purposely make things difficult for her? Right now, the various military factions and even many strategists were talking about Northern Li. They all considered Northern Li to be her power. The powers of Western Qin were all coveting it. For the past 2 years, Northern Li had been a mess. However, once the grasslands of Northern Li had recovered, the war horses of Northern Li would be feared and admired by the various military factions. Disaster relief relied on the imperial court's resources and the national treasury's money. When the time came, whoever truly controlled northern Lee's grasslands and horse ranches would reap the benefits of their own military factions. Actually, Han Yunqi had been hoping for Ning Cheng's arrival this entire time. She wanted Ning Cheng to accept his rewards and argue with the various military factions. In times of war, everyone would sincerely unite as one. But in times of peace, there would be struggles for benefits. The art of monarch was all about balance. As the future ruler of the empire, Long Fei Yi couldn't show favoritism on the surface, even if he was biased in his heart. Meanwhile, Ning Cheng and the D clan would be his best excuse to refuse the various military factions entering Northern Li in the future. Although it was a difficult problem, Long Fei Yi wasn't truly stumped. He immediately ordered, Chu Shifeng, has Su Donglin returned? Su Donglin had been borrowed by Gu Beiyue to stay in Medical City. By now, Gu Beiyue should have returned to Medical City. He'll be back in the next 2 days, Chu Shifeng replied. When he comes back, you should personally pay a visit to Winter Crow country. There was no need to investigate the slave line. Instead, they would investigate from the line of beast language. Jin Zi must have some background. Long Fei Yi said. In the past, they'd investigated Jin Zi based on the fact that he'd been sold as a slave to three-way black market. They'd investigated both the slave trade at Winter Crow country and the people who'd sold him there. This lead didn't yield any useful information, so it stopped. Later on, because of Bai Yanqing's affairs, Long Fei Yi was too busy to pay attention to the matter. Now that he thought about it, if Jin Zi wasn't from the Black Clan, then there had to be something else. To truly control Jin Zi, they had to figure out his background first. Yes, this subordinate will make preparations right away. Chu Shifeng obeyed and left. I wonder how that girl Ling is doing, Han Yunqi muttered to herself. She'd asked Ning Cheng to investigate Ling, and Jin Zi, but Ning Cheng still hadn't given her any feedback. If he wanted to leave, he should have at least reported back first. As they spoke, a guard called in from outside. Your Highness, Princess, Miss Ling requests an audience. If this was Han Yunqi's room, Mu Ling would have rushed in long ago. Unfortunately, this was Long Fei Ye's study. Han Yunqi was probably the only one who dared to barge in. Little Rue still hadn't left yet. As Han Yunqi expected, Mu Ling lost weight again as soon as she entered. Han Yunqi was worried about losing weight after giving birth, so seeing Mu Ling like this made her feel complicated. When Mu Ling saw Long Fei Yi, she politely called him Your Highness, but affectionately called Han Yunqi Big Sis. She still didn't have the guts to call Long Fei Yi brother-in-law. Han Yunqi wanted to ask Mu Ling about Jin Zi's recent situation, but Mu Ling spoke up first. Big Sis, Ning Cheng returned Jin Zi's indenture agreement. He went back to the Winter Crow clan. Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi exchanged glances before Han Yunqi asked hastily, When did this happen? 3 months ago, Mu Ling answered. Long Fei Yi's expression turned cold. What a Ning Cheng. He didn't even mention such a big thing. This matter also reminded Long Fei Yi that he had no one in Northern Li. He had many people he could use, but not many were suitable to be sent to Northern Li. Now it seemed that he still had to send a few strategists to the army in the future. Did Jin Zi return? Who was in charge of the Black Clan army these few months? Han Yunqi asked hastily. Mu Ling didn't know anything about the army. She only knew that everything in the army had been stable for the past 3 months. Jin Zi was gone, and so was Ning Cheng, who was going to clean up the mess in Northern Li at this critical juncture. If Ning Cheng had wanted to leave long ago, why would he have accepted Northern Li's request in the first place? Just when Long Fei Yi thought he'd misjudged the man, Chu Shifeng suddenly doubled back with unexpected news. Your Highness, Jin Zi is outside the palace asking for an audience. Chu Shifeng was about to leave when he ran into Jin Zi. He was very curious. Did Jin Zi come with Mu Ling? Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi both looked towards Mu Ling, at these words. Mu Ling was at a loss as well. Ning Cheng said he left for 3 months. I only saw him once 3 months ago, but I've never seen him again. What did he come for? Long Fei asked. He said he wanted to see the princess to collect a debt. Chu Shifeng reported hastily. Collect a debt? What did Han Yunxi owe Ningcheng? Everyone was even more puzzled. Long Fei immediately had Chu Shifeng summon the man inside. Mu Ling averted her gaze. She wanted to avoid him, but when she thought about it, she realized that their agreement had been overdue for so long. Jin Zi wouldn't make things difficult for her here. Despite this, Mu Ling still wanted to leave. She'd always been carefree and fearless, but she didn't know when she'd started to fear seeing him. Big sis, I'll leave first. Mu Ling murmured. What? You don't want to marry him? Han Yunxi asked back. Mu Ling finally remembered that her big sister had always suspected her and Jin Zi. She averted her gaze. I don't want it anymore. I don't want to get married so early. If there's nothing, why did you find someone to keep an eye on me? You really don't want to marry? Han Yunxi asked seriously. Really? Back then I was just hot-headed. Now I don't like Jin Zi either, Mu Ling explained. Then sit down. If Jin Zi comes to ask for someone from me, you should tell him clearly. Otherwise, he'll really think I owe him a debt in the future. Han Yunxi's stern expression made Mu Ling afraid to move. She could only sit back down. Soon enough, Chu Shifeng brought Jin Zi in. Jin Zi was as skinny as ever, dressed in black robes. His hair was short like a foreigner's, and his bangs hid the corners of his eyes. He stood ramrod straight, his eyes cold. He knew Mu Ling was in the palace, but never expected Mu Ling to be here as well. He was clearly surprised, but quickly hid it. He bowed to Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi. Your Highness, Princess, where's Ningcheng? Long Fei Yi asked. I want to know where he is too. Unfortunately, I can't find him, Jin Zi intoned. I'm here to collect a debt from the princess. Jin Zi looked towards Han Yunxi, where Mu Ling was sitting next to Han Yunxi with her head bowed. What do I owe you? Han Yunxi asked cold. Mu Ling had been calm before, but as soon as she heard Jin Zi's words, she grew nervous and unconsciously rubbed at her handkerchief. But Jin Zi only said, Ningcheng is the one who owes me the debt. Ningcheng ran off, so I can only find you to collect it. He didn't come because of us? Mu Ling subconsciously looked up at Jin Zi, only to discover that his eyes were cold and calm. He didn't stare at her like she was his prey like in the past. Chapter 1197. Jin Zi didn't stare at Mu Ling like before. At this moment, he treated Mu Ling as air and didn't even look at her. Han Yunxi saw all of this with her own eyes. Han Yunxi was even more surprised. Coldly, she asked, What does Ningcheng owe you? When Ningcheng left northernly, he promised me that if I came to Yining Palace with him, he would return my bank to me. I came, but he ran away. Princess, if I don't ask you for the debt, who should I ask for it from? Jin Zi said very calmly. Mu Ling only thought that Jin Zi came to ask for money, but Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi both became serious. Gold's line, this sentence could be said to have a profound meaning. According to Han Yunxi's understanding, Ningcheng had repeatedly persuaded Jin Zi to stay and pretend to be the Black Clan's orphan until the end. However, Jin Zi didn't agree. Ningcheng left the army and came to Yining to report the completion of the mission and to receive the reward. After Long Fei Yi became the emperor, the Ning army must be rewarded according to their merits. Jin Zi agreed to come with him. In other words, Jin Zi accepted Ningcheng's persuasion and wanted to receive the title and reward together with Ningcheng. In other words, Jin Zi decided to stay in the northernly army since he could come to Yining. When Ningcheng left, not only did Jin Zi not follow, but he also came to them. His attitude couldn't be more obvious. At this time, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi finally figured out Ningcheng's layout. In northernly, if Jin Zi was sincere in surrendering, then their previous worries were at least unnecessary for the time being. Moreover, the Black Clan army and the Tiger army were in charge of northernly, while the Ning Clan army retreated to the second line. In this way, the people of the various military factions could not say anything, let alone have the opportunity to point the spearhead at Han Yunqi. Ning Cheng's departure was clearly a retreat in order to advance. He really gave Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi a big gift. Jin Zi took out the tiger tag and presented it with both hands. Princess, this is my sincerity. The money of the bank can't be less. Han Yunqi smiled helplessly, while Long Fei Yi said unhappily, have you really never seen Ning Cheng? Jin Zi spoke the truth. This token was originally with him. A few days ago when I was in the inn, a boy brought it over. Since Ning Cheng has already left, why bother looking for him? In the past, Jin Zi didn't know much about the Di clan and Western Qin's royal family, but after fighting with Ning Cheng in Northern Li for half a year, he understood everything very well. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. Although Ning Cheng cleaned up the battlefield in Northern Li very cleanly and didn't leave any trouble for them, this was a public fact. Ning Cheng and his personal grudges hadn't been settled yet. In these past few months, while Long Fei Yi was busy, he had sent people to find a lot of strong liquor. Was Ning Cheng admitting defeat? Long Fei Yi wasn't someone who would accept defeat. Coldly, he said, in the future, when you see Ning Cheng, please tell him that this crown prince invited him to drink. Okay, I'll remember it. Every time Jin Zi drank with Ning Cheng, he would get drunk first. He really wanted to know, if Long Fei Yi and Ning Cheng drank, who would get drunk first? Han Yunqi, who didn't know the truth, was rather surprised. Long Fei Yi actually took the initiative to invite Ning Cheng for a drink. Was there any conspiracy behind this? Was Long Fei Yi trying to lure Ning Cheng out? Ning Cheng probably wouldn't show himself, right? Regarding the matter of the bank, go to Three-Way Black Market's East Origin Hall. Someone will arrange it. Long Fei Yi said. Since Jin Zi had come looking for Han Yunqi to ask for a debt, he naturally had to help Han Yunqi repay it. Jin Zi, I will pay attention to your background. I heard Ning Cheng say that you miss Winter Crow's grasslands. Han Yunqi said with a smile, in the future, if you have the heart, His Highness and I will definitely support you. Someone will have to manage Winter Crow's slave trade sooner or later. Han Yunqi's words were reserved, but Jin Zi could understand. She said this to make Jin Zi give up on the slave trade. She also gave Jin Zi hope, hinting to Jin Zi that she had thoughts of taking over Winter Crow country. Even if Jin Zi changed his mind one day, there was no way out. All right, this one will remember it. Jin Zi said coldly. He was about to leave, but Han Yunqi stopped him. That's right, there's something else I need to ask, so you won't come back to ask for a debt in the future. What is it? Jin Zi asked. This little sister of mine, you're not going to marry her, right? Han Yunqi asked in a serious tone. Mu Ling didn't expect Han Yunqi to be so direct. She almost buried her head on the table. This time, Jin Zi was also surprised. He had thought that the agreement could be delayed for a while. He had thought that if he didn't give Mu Ling a chance to lay her cards on the table, their relationship would never be considered over. But he finally looked at Mu Ling and asked coldly, is she still going to marry? Han Yunqi waited for Mu Ling to reply. Mu Ling lowered her head and didn't speak for a long time. Are you still going to marry? Han Yunqi couldn't help but ask. No, I'm not going to marry, Mu Ling said in a low voice. She, who always kept her promises, said the word no when she broke her promise. In that instant, Jin Zi's gaze immediately moved away, no longer looking at her. This was the result of their one-year agreement. She had broken her promise. Jin Zi shrugged. Then I'm not going to marry her. Goodbye. After saying that, he didn't stay and turned to leave. Mu Ling didn't expect things to be so simple. When she was in Northern Li, she was on tenterhooks every day, waiting for Jin Zi to come looking for her. She was already prepared to lay her cards on the table and go back on her word. She knew that Jin Zi would reject her, get angry, and even hit her. She had thought of all kinds of excuses to deal with him, and even wanted to use her sister and brother-in-law to threaten him. But who knew that after not seeing her for 3 months, he would let her go so easily today? He just said, then I'm not going to marry her, and everything would be fine? Mu Ling looked up in disbelief. She couldn't see Jin Zi's cold face, only his thin and lonely back. He walked out the door, and his back gradually disappeared. Was it over just like that? This guy, who had always longed to return to his hometown and roam the grasslands freely, chose to stay in the Northern Army and shoulder the burden of rebuilding Northern after the disaster. This guy who forced himself on her, bullied her, and was so stubborn that she couldn't persuade him to change his mind or beg him, had said, "Then I'm not going to marry her." Mu-Ling should have felt relieved that Jinzi didn't pursue the matter, but she had an indescribable feeling instead. She faintly sensed that something was wrong with Jinzi, but she couldn't put her finger on it. "Jinzi, why didn't you leave?" When Jinzi burned his indenture agreement in the beginning, he didn't choose to find Mu-Ling or leave. That probably meant that he couldn't leave her for the rest of his life. That was why the hesitant Ning Chung finally decided to send the Black Clan and Tiger troops to the various strongholds to set up a trap for Jinzi and Han Yunxi. After Jinzi left, Long Fei Yi murmured to Chu Shifeng, "Spread the news. Just say that I intend to make Jinzi the great general of the North and take control of Northern Li's military." Long Fei Yi knew what to do, but spreading the news ahead of time was precisely to shut up the mouths of his subordinates. After all, as soon as the plague in Northern Li ended, many rumors pointed the finger of blame at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi sat on one side and secretly smiled at the words. It was natural for a married woman to be favored by her husband and protected by her maternal family. But in this world, from the imperial clan to the common folk, there would always be people who couldn't stand to see such things happen. There was no lack of gossip and conspiracies that were impossible to guard against. It was as if a married woman was meant to be bullied, sacrificed, and compromised. There was a good saying, the husband was stronger than the maternal family, and the maternal family was stronger than one's own strength. Only by being strong could one convince others wholeheartedly. Han Yunxi was strong in all aspects, but she lacked a military force that she could truly control. Since the Ning clan troops could retreat to the front lines, she could cultivate Jinzi's Northern Li military into a force that truly belonged to her. She wasn't sure how reliable Jinzi was, but at least he'd be reliable for the next few years. In the next few years, she had to borrow this fellow, Jinzi, to cultivate a truly loyal force. Northern Li was close to the mysterious continent, so Han Yunxi figured that perhaps she could personally travel to the snowy mountains to check on the ice sea after she was done with her business. Long Fei Yi had made Han Xin promise to protect Northern Li's northern borders for 20 years. She felt that opening up Northern Li to the mysterious continent was a good choice. The mysterious continent's agricultural and medical industries weren't as developed as Cloud Realm continent. Perhaps Northern Li could even be called a commercial stronghold. Of course, that was all for later. Han Yunxi played with Jinzi's tiger medallion and grinned. "Long Fei Yi, this plaything's mine." Long Fei Yi glanced at her, too lazy to speak. Well, had he ever refused to give her anything she wanted? Long Fei Yi tossed over a command medallion, which Han Yunxi accepted. Upon closer inspection, she found it unfamiliar. The medallion was made of bronze and looked very simple. It should be a military command medallion, with the word command on the back and the map of Cloud Realm continent on the front. This is... Han Yunxi didn't understand. "I ordered it a while ago and sent it over this morning." Long Fei Yi rose to retrieve a brocade box as he spoke. Inside were several command medallions that looked similar to the one in Han Yunxi's hands, but with a different map on the front. Han Yunxi's medallion was a map of Cloud Realm continent, while the other medallions represented the east, west, north, south, and central regions of the continent. Without a doubt, this was a brand new set of command medallions. Han Yunxi's medallion was a command medallion that allowed her to control all of Cloud Realm continent's military affairs. Cloud Realm continent was so big that it naturally had to be divided into several large military regions. The head of the military regions was basically handed over to the heads of the various military branches. However, the selection of the ministers in charge of the various military regions had to be done carefully. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi seriously. "You have someone in mind?" "Who?" Long Fei-Ye's lips quirked up into a faint smile as he took the medallion from Han Yunqi's hands. He fiddled with it with interest, but didn't say a word. Tell me. Han Yunqi grew anxious. Long Fei, you must have someone in mind if he'd already made the medallion. She couldn't guess, because she didn't know anyone suitable for the position. Rather than letting someone unsuitable take on the heavy responsibility, it was better for Long Fei-Yi to take charge of the various military factions himself. You can tell me in secret, but I won't tell anyone. At most, I'll tell Gu Beiyue. Han Yunqi grew anxious. Chapter 1198. Seeing Han Yunqi's curiosity, Long Fei-Ye's smile deepened. Long Fei-Yi placed all the military tokens into the brocade box, then handed it to Han Yunqi. You, me? Han Yunqi hadn't recovered from the shock yet, and only caught the box reflexively. I was planning to wait 2 or 3 years until Northern Li had stabilized before handing over military affairs to you. Now it looks like I can give it to you. Long Fei-Yi smiled. Only then did Han Yunqi realize that Long Fei had been planning to give her the command medallion. Me? It had to be said that Han Yunqi was both surprised and nervous. Military affairs were the greatest guarantee of a country's stability. What are you afraid of? Long Fei-Yi arched a brow. Aren't you afraid that Bailey Yuanlong will come to bother you every day? Han Yunqi countered. They just found a suitable way to deal with Northern Li. But Long Fei-Yi was simply stirring up trouble. If news of this got out, wouldn't all of Cloud Realm continent explode? Bailey Yuanlong had been in charge of distributing disaster relief supplies and had handled matters fairly. Long Fei-Yi hadn't been able to do anything to him, so Bailey Yuanlong had returned a few days ago. Long Fei-Yi said seriously, I want to tell the world that I'm not partial to East Qin or Western Qin. I'm only partial to you, the mistress of Cloud Realm continent. Northern Li still involved the interests of the D clan's Ning family. Now that the Ning family had retreated, Han Yunqi wouldn't hand Northern Li's military power to the Ning family in the future. He was doing this to tell the world that Han Yunqi wasn't just the princess of Western Qin, but also his woman, Long Fei-Ye's woman, the future mistress of Cloud Realm continent. The greatest power behind Han Yunqi wasn't the D clan, but him. Han Yunqi's power was shared with him. He wanted to see who dared to question his authority. There was no need for Long Fei-Yi to explain further. The words mistress told Han Yunqi everything. Han Yunqi was really surprised and pleasantly surprised. In truth, she had always wanted to rule the country together with Long Fei-Yi. She had many modern ideas that might not be suitable for Cloud Realm situation, but they could still be used as reference and revised. However, she would not rashly ask for an official position, because she knew that this was still a society where men were above men. Women were not suitable to be involved in politics. She could talk freely with Long Fei-Yi about how to govern the country and how to manage the army in private, but she could not sit with him in the imperial study room, facing civil and military officials discussing together. Who would have thought that Long Fei-Yi would be so magnanimous and confident that he would allow her to step out and participate in politics? Han Yunqi looked at Long Fei-Yi, not knowing what to say. Why? Do you agree? Long Fei-Yi frowned at her. No, Han Yunqi denied and sighed. She held the brocade box with both hands and said seriously, I've agreed. You have no room for regret. Also, you're not allowed to give out these command medallions. When the day comes for the reward, I'll personally deliver them to Bailey Yuanlong and the others. Han Yunqi said as she picked out the command medallion and put it in her sleeve. I'll accept this one. Long Fei-Yi looked at Han Yunqi's rare adorableness and couldn't help but laugh. He couldn't help but wonder if he had a daughter. Would she be even cuter than Han Yunqi now? Remembering that Rui was only 6 months old, Long Fei-Yi couldn't bear to see him like this. There was still a long way to go. He could wait. Han Yunqi was in a good mood and got up lazily. Mu Linger, who hadn't dared to speak all this time, quickly got up as well. Heavens, seeing Long Fei-Yi spoil her sister was simply too scary. Although Long Fei-Yi looked especially good when he smiled, it was still very scary in her eyes. She had long wanted to leave, but didn't dare to interrupt them. She could only quietly stand aside and pretend to be air. Linger, I'm going out for a stroll. Do you want to come? Han Yunqi asked. She had almost forgotten how long it had been since she left Yuning Palace. Do you want to take Rui out? Mu Ling quickly asked. He's sleeping right now. No need, Han Yunqi replied. Then I won't go. I'll go watch over Rui and wait for him to wake up. Mu Ling smiled. She didn't even realize how ugly her smile was. A complicated look flickered past Han Yunqi's eyes. She knew that there had to be something between Mu Ling and Jin Zi that she didn't know about. But since Jin Zi wasn't going back to Winter Crow country and had declared in front of her and Long Fei Yi that he wouldn't marry Mu Ling shouldn't be in any danger anymore. As for what had happened between them, she didn't want to ask. Feelings were too complicated. She rejoiced in the fact that she and Long Fei Yi liked each other by coincidence. Find a few more people to accompany them. Be careful, Long Fei Yi instructed in a low voice. All right, Han Yunqi replied seriously, but her heart was helpless. Who else in Cloud Realm continent could hurt her besides Long Fei Yi? She was planning to pick out some fabric from the cloth shop to make some new clothes for Long Fei Yi and Rui. Although Zhao Mama took care of their meals and clothing, she still had to take care of them as a wife and mother. As soon as Han Yunqi left, Long Fei Yi instructed the Shadow Guard in a low voice. Go to Kingan Private Bank and tell Manager Luo that this Crown Prince wants to take over all of Cloud Realm Continent's wineries. The Shadow Guard couldn't help but remind him, Your Highness, there's little grain left after the war. The winery's business isn't doing well. With so little grain, how could they use it to make wine? As a result, the winery's costs were high and their business was even worse. Long Fei Yi turned to look, and the Shadow Guard realized he'd spoken out of turn. He quickly accepted his orders and withdrew. Long Fei Yi didn't interrupt the wine business because he wanted to force Ning Qing out. It wouldn't be too late to find out more about the wineries first. Since he dared to stand him up, he'd like to see if Ning Chang would come looking for him if he couldn't get a drink. With Ning Chang's pickiness about the quality of wine and his drinking capacity, he'd be satisfied regardless of whether it was a farmhouse's brew or a small tavern. If Ning Chang wanted a drink, he'd definitely go to a big winery. Now that the official business was over, he had to settle his personal matters before leaving. Mu Ling followed Han Yunqi out of the study. They walked together for a while before parting ways. Han Yunqi walked out of the palace, but Mu Ling didn't accompany her. Instead, she went to the back of the mountain. After leaving for more than 3 months, she found that she wasn't as sad as before when she stood under the thorny tree at the top of the mountain again. Instead, she felt an indescribable sense of intimacy. It was as if no matter how restless her heart was, it all calmed down when she came here. Jinzi, I broke the contract. I'm sorry. Chi big brother, you should know that Linger is free again. But Linger won't chase you all over the world like before. Knowing you're still in this world and looking at the same sky and moon as me is enough to satisfy Linger. Mu Ling stayed in the little hut by the thorny tree for a few days. She decided to go back to Medical City and revive the Mu clan, not for the sake of the clan's reputation or profits, but for the sake of doing what she was best at and most fond of. During this trip to Northern Li, she discovered many problems with the ingredients. If Gu Beiwei hadn't stopped her and asked her to privately discuss the changes with Medicine City's people, she would have spread the news long ago and made a big fuss. She was going to revive the Mu clan and personally teach a bunch of disciples to supervise every bag of medicine sent out by Medicine City. Mu Ling went down the mountain to say goodbye to Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi when she ran into a letter from Medical City. Chu Shifeng handed a letter to His Highness with a smile. Miss Ling, you came the right time. Dr. Gu sent you a letter too. Linger has one too? Han Yunqi was curious. What kind of private matter couldn't be put together in one letter? Why split it into two? But when Long Fei Yi opened the letter, he saw that it was a wedding invitation. Everyone was stunned by the sight. Mu Ling quickly opened her own letter and pulled out an identical one. Eldest young Miss Qin, Han Yunqi and Mu Ling exclaimed at the same time. Although they knew that Gu Beiyue and eldest young Miss Qin were going to marry, they never expected it to happen so soon. Gu Beiyue had just returned to Medical City. Could it be that he brought forward the engagement as soon as he got back, and then immediately got married? What's the rush? Is he afraid that he won't be able to find a wife? Han Yunxi was a little angry at Gu Beiyue's sloppiness. For one thing, the Qin clan wouldn't have the guts to betroth eldest young Miss Qin to another man since they'd already sent someone to talk about marriage. For another, Long Fei Yi was going to proclaim himself emperor and found a new country soon. Then Gu Beiyue would definitely be rewarded and conferred title. Couldn't he settle down first and then think about marriage? Long Fei Yi had asked him to be the grand tutor, but he hadn't even replied yet. Even the cool-headed Long Fei revealed a look of surprise. He quickly opened up the wedding invitation and looked at the date. It was the end of the month, so there were only a dozen or so days left. It was only enough time for them to rush from Yuning to Medical City. Big sis, I still think that Dr. Gu's being forced into marriage. Mu Ling couldn't help but speak up. Han Yunxi didn't care much before, but now she couldn't stay calm. She glanced at Long Fei Yi and said seriously, "Let's get ready and set off. We should at least meet eldest young Miss Qin before the wedding, right? No one can force him. I like to meet him." Long Fei Yi smiled helplessly. He was indeed curious about this marriage. However, he was more concerned about whether Gu Beiyue would be the grand tutor or not. Han Yunxi and Mu Ling left first, but Long Fei Yi stayed for 2 or 3 days to deal with the matters at hand. Before winter, he should pay respects to his parents, ancestors, and return to his family. Then, he had to establish a new country. This winter, he still couldn't accompany Han Yunxi to the Jiangnan Plum Sea to spend the winter. Perhaps he had to wait until Ruger could walk. Gu and Ning Cheng didn't receive an invitation. It wasn't that Gu Beiyue didn't want to invite them, but that he couldn't find anyone. However, news of Gu Beiyue's wedding quickly spread throughout Cloud Realm. Naturally, it reached Gu and Ning Cheng's ears as well. As for whether or not the two of them would appear at Gu Beiyue's wedding, that was unknown. At this moment, Gu Beiyue was walking alone in the longest corridor of the medical academy. The bright moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the entire back courtyard and making everything seem even quieter. It was just like Gu Beiyue's tall and thin figure, his snow-white robes and gentle face. He was as bright as the moon, as silent as a shadow. When he smiled, even the moon in the sky seemed to soften. Amidst the silence, the little thing jumped out of his sleeve and grabbed his sleeve as if it was swinging on a swing. It flipped over and grabbed his sleeve, climbed all the way to his shoulder, and squatted down. He walked further and further away, turning his head from time to press his cheek against Lil Thing. The man and beast formed a world of their own. Where's Gu Beiyue going? Chapter 1199. Gu Beiyue brought Lil Thing all the way to the end of the corridor and left the medical academy through the back door. Lil Thing sat on the young master's shoulder, full of suspicion. From time to time, it would tilt its head to look at the young master and squeak a few times to ask questions. "It's so late. Where is the young master going?" And he's going through the back door of the medical academy, as if he doesn't want anyone to know he's gone out. Squeak, 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 squeak. Lil Thing squeaked a few more times. Gu Beiyue took Lil Thing off his shoulder and placed it in his palm. He looked at it and said softly, "Be good. We're almost there. Don't worry." Lil Thing didn't understand, but it knew that the young master wanted it to squeak again. It rubbed against the young master's large and warm palm and settled down. Gradually, Gu Beiyue sped up. His figure was like a shadow as he swept through the empty and quiet streets. He was so fast that Lil Thing couldn't recognize the road. Not long after, they entered a secluded alley and stopped in front of the door of a house. Lil Thing's round black eyes darted around in the dark. It felt like it was about to learn another secret of the young master. Gu Beiyue looked around and made sure that no one was around before knocking on the door. The speed at which he knocked on the door was clearly a special rhythm. It was a secret signal. Soon, someone opened the door. It was none other than Shi Yuba, who had been missing in Medical City for a long time. Back then, Gu Beiwei had used him to lure Han Yunxi to Medical City. "Master," Shi Yuba said respectfully. Gu Beiwei didn't say anything and walked in. Lil Thing laid on his shoulder and stared at Shi Yuba. It didn't recognize him at all. It was a very small house. Gu Beiwei quickly walked into the room. At this time, Lil Thing discovered that there was a child hidden in the room. It was about 1 month old and was sleeping soundly. Lil Thing was even more puzzled. What was the young master doing? Where did these babies come from? Gu Beiwei personally checked the baby's pulse, limbs, and especially the shape of its feet. Shi Yuba quickly came in and whispered, "Master, this child's feet are not bad, right?" This child was an abandoned baby found by Shi Yuba. Shi Yuba had made a mistake in the Long Tianma incident, so Gu Beiwei had him leave Medical City to take care of abandoned babies. He needed some children to start practicing shadow arts from a young age. To practice the shadow art, one had to start from a young age. Although the shadow technique was a secret technique of the Shadow Clan, it wasn't something that only members of the Shadow Clan could practice. Outsiders could also practice it. Outsiders needed to start training their leg strength and footwork from a much younger age compared to the Shadow Clansmen. Moreover, their speed after training would be far slower than the Shadow Clansmen. However, it was still very easy to overpower an ordinary Qinggong. He was the only remaining member of the Shadow Clan. Since he had found the princess, he couldn't let the Shadow Clan die out in his generation. He also couldn't let the Shadow technique end on him. He had been secretly cultivating a few real Shadow Guards for the princess, but it would take more than 1 or 2 years. Shadow Guard, as the name implied, was a bodyguard that was like a shadow. Not only was there a high requirement for martial arts, but there was also a high requirement for moral conduct. It wasn't for anything else, but because a Shadow Guard was the person closest to the master, and also the person who understood the master the most. They could know secrets that other servants didn't know. If they didn't have good moral conduct, they would be a hidden danger to the master. Therefore, whether it was martial arts or moral conduct, he had to personally check. He needed to train a few Shadow Guards, and more importantly, he needed a true successor of the Shadow Clan. He had been searching for the most suitable body type and the most suitable leg shape. However, he didn't expect Shi Yuba to find it so quickly. The child in front of him was exactly what he wanted. "It's him," Gu Beiwei asked indifferently. "How many days has it been a month?" "Another 7 days." Shi Yuba answered truthfully. "Master, you still have 10 days to get married. So, it's reasonable that he was born a month early." "It's not a problem. I'll find a way when the time comes." Gu Beiwei nodded. Shi Yuba couldn't help but remind him, "Master, even if you want to adopt a child, it doesn't have to be eldest Miss Qin. As long as you ask, there are many women in Medical City who are willing." Master didn't care about marriage, nor did he care about romantic relationships. He only wanted to marry a wife, adopt a child, and treat it as his own son to continue the Shadow Clan's bloodline. Not only did he want to let the world know that the Shadow Clan was behind the princess, but he also wanted to give an explanation to the Shadow Clan's ancestors. However, there were many women who were willing to follow Master in name only, and there were many who were more outstanding than eldest Miss Qin. Why did Master choose a woman that no one wanted? Gu Beiwei raised his eyebrows and looked over. Shi Yuba immediately shut his mouth, not daring to say more. Why did it have to be eldest Miss Qin? There were too many reasons why he wanted to marry eldest Miss Qin. First, the Qin family was a great power in Medical City, and the only power that could contend with the Ren family. If he married eldest Miss Qin, the Ren family would definitely be anxious and wouldn't dare to oppose Medical City's submission to the Long Fei Yi and the jurisdiction of the imperial court. Second, it was difficult for eldest Miss Qin to marry outside because of her handicapped body, and she didn't want to marry. If he married her, he would give her a stable environment, and she would help him give birth to a child. Each of them would get what they needed, and it wouldn't be considered as holding her back. If it were another girl from the Qin family, he would really hold her back for the rest of her life. In this life, he wouldn't hold anyone back, and he wouldn't let them down. Thirdly, he trusted the character of the first miss of the Qin family. Marrying a wife was a matter of life. If she wasn't someone he trusted, and the truth was revealed in 3 to 5 years, how would he deal with it? Gu Beiwa leaned close to the infant and gently kissed its forehead, saying softly, "Child, from now on, you're no longer an orphan. I'll watch you grow up." Suddenly, the little thing squeaked. Heavens! The young master actually kissed that child. Who was this child? Could it be the young master's illegitimate child? Why didn't it know who the child's mother was? The little thing finally couldn't stay calm. It squeaked loudly while jumping to the child's side, wanting to see it more clearly. The baby was disturbed. Its little face wrinkled, and it looked like it was about to cry. Shiyuba hurriedly picked it up and coaxed it. Gu Beiwa picked the little thing up. He didn't get angry, but seriously asked it to be quiet. The little thing kicked its feet, wanting to ask clearly. Unfortunately, no matter how much it struggled, the young master didn't understand what it meant. Suddenly, the little thing quieted down. It lowered its head, feeling sad. So what if the young master understood what it meant? So what if the young master answered it? It also didn't understand what the young master said. The young master had never been mine. There were many things about the young master that it didn't know. Seeing that the little thing stopped moving, Gu Beiwa gently stroked its back and then put it on his shoulder. Lil Thing slowly curled up into a ball and looked pitifully at the child. It couldn't help but feel sad. "Mama Yunshi, did you know that the young master has a child too? Take care of it personally. This matter is confidential, so don't let anyone else do it," Gu Beiwa instructed. Shiyuban nodded respectfully. Yes, this subordinate understands. After returning to the medical academy, Gu Beiwa's mood didn't change much. He was still as calm as still water and quickly fell asleep. Lil Thing, on the other hand, was curled up in Gu Beiwa's stomach. Every now and then, it'd switch positions and go back and forth, unable to sleep. In the end, it simply jumped off the bed and onto a nearby cabinet, planning to run out the window for some fresh air. Unexpectedly, it saw 5 or 6 red invitation cards on top of the cabinet. Alarmed, Lil Thing quickly opened the cards, but it couldn't understand them at all. Who's getting married? There's so many of them. They don't seem like the young master's own invitations, but his own. Heavens! When did the young master write them? I didn't even know. Lil Thing grew more and more uneasy. It picked up one of the cards and ran back to bed, flinging it at Gu Beiwa's face. Gu Beiwa woke up and looked at the fuming Lil Thing, then at the invitation card on the side. He gave a start before bursting into laughter. He definitely didn't know how handsome his sleepy face looked when he smiled. He didn't have his usual calmness and maturity. Instead, he looked lazy and casual. His originally handsome face suddenly looked devilish. Lil Thing stared blankly. "Sir, just what kind of person are you?" Lil Thing couldn't understand you at all. Gu Beiwa picked up the invitation card and flipped through it before getting off the bed to exchange it for another one. He handed it to Lil Thing with both hands with a smile. "I'm getting married. This is for you." Lil Thing was even more certain that the young master was the one who wanted to send out these invitations. This letter was meant for it. The young master was really getting married. Was the woman he was going to marry the mother of that child? I just saw. Lil Thing didn't move, but its round, black eyes were already wet. Gu Beiwa couldn't help but laugh at Lil Thing's pitiful look. "Don't worry. No matter who I marry, I'll only treat your master well." Lil Thing only saw the young master smile and didn't know what he said. It slapped the invitation card away with its paw and immediately flew out of the window. Angry, Gu Beiwa muttered to himself. Once the little thing got angry, it disappeared for a few days straight. Gu Beiwa didn't look for it either. He knew Lil Thing would come back. A few days later, Han Yunshi and Mu Ling were rescued. There were only 3 days left until Gu Beiwa's wedding. The news of Gu Beiwa's wedding had spread throughout the medical city, but the medical school was still as usual. There wasn't the slightest bit of celebration. It was because Gu Beiwa had given the order not to be extravagant, not to hold a banquet, and not to affect the medical school's teaching and treatment. Because of this order, it caused a lot of conjectures. Everyone increasingly suspected that Gu Beiwa had other motives for marrying eldest Miss Qin and that he didn't really like her. However, no matter how many rumors and slanders there were, Gu Beiyue never clarified any of them. When Han Yunxi and Mu Ling saw Gu Beiyue, the tailor had just changed out of the clothes sent by the tailor. The clothes didn't fit very well. When he saw Han Yunxi and Mu Ling, he immediately put down what he was doing and walked over. Princess, Miss Ling, did you have a safe trip? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.